All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second monthly newsroom analysis. Give everybody a chance to get in and get comfortable. Let me know if you can hear me. Had some technological challenges, and that kind of kept me from getting started as soon as I wanted to, but I think we got through everything now. I'm just getting some things set up on my screen behind the scenes so that I can communicate with everybody. All right, so happy to be here, excited to do this. Glad to see everybody showing up. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Mike. Hi, Michael Onyx. It's so good to have you here again. I recognize your guys' name from last time. Okay, I was having a little bit of a moment right before I hit live because technology. As soon as I wanted to sit down and go live, it decided that it wanted to challenge me, and I had to work through all of those little hiccups. Luckily, I think everything should be working the way that I want it to. This live stream should be a little smoother than the last one. If you were here for that one, or if you've seen the pre-recorded footage after the fact, you know, on my podcast or whatever, then you know that that was not a smooth or seamless or polished live stream by any means. It was the first time I'd been using this software, which is called Streamlabs, by the way. If you are a streamer or know anything about streaming, follow people who stream. I'm sure that is something that you are aware of. It's a very popular streaming software for people, and it works really, really well. I'm very happy with it. I've just been working to figure it out, and there's a little bit of a learning curve with everything, but that's okay. If you're not learning, what are you doing? So if you were here for the January newsroom analysis, then you already know what the deal is. In these analyses, I sit down, I pull notable headlines from the past month, anything pertaining to my specific research niche, whatever it is that I'm looking into at the moment in time, which of course right now is Opus Dei, and we read through it together in real time, looking back at these articles that were published in the past month. I feel like it's a good way for me to show you how I kind of go through and comb through articles, and I mean, this is so a chance for you to see the real-time process for how I do what I do, which is nothing complicated, and anybody can do it. So anything to destigmatize, looking for information and getting accurate information to people is a good one in my book. So it's good for that, but then also it creates a little bit of an archive, a little bit of a record for all of these events that play out as a result of or connected to these individuals and organizations, the movers and shakers in our world. And I just think that, you know, it's such a tired old saying. We've heard it a million times and it's been beaten to our heads, but I do think it is true that it's important to know your history because otherwise you are doomed to repeat it. We have to be aware of the things that have happened in the past. We have to be aware of mistakes that were made by people who perhaps were very well intentioned, perhaps had the best of intentions going into whatever venture it was that they began, but you know what? Sometimes things just don't work out the way that you intend them to, and it's important for us to be able to authentically and intellectually engage with these issues, have conversations about them, destigmatize talking about these serious issues, and hopefully move forward to a better, brighter, more equitable, well, at least a more balanced society where people are able to advance and earn and pursue life, liberty, and happiness. So that's my little spiel to get us started here. We have a lot of articles to get through today. February was a busy month, and there's just a lot of things that I want to talk about, so I'm not going to dilly-dally too much longer. going to go ahead and get right in. Just a reminder that any information to connect with me, follow me on socials, all of that is listed in the description of this live stream, as well as a source document for all of the news articles that I'm going to be covering in this episode, and just other good stuff, as well as mental health resources. If you or someone you know is struggling and is in need of mental health support, I have some resources down below as well. Because I always like to say that life is hard, but we do not have to go at it totally unequipped or unprepared. So let me go ahead and get myself set up here and have to resize my screen so that you guys can see the page. Let me make sure. Nope, that's the YouTube live. I don't want to show that off. Let me get my web page pulled up real quick. There's a couple of things that are like not necessarily current events news, but just things I kind of want to mention in passing because I think that they are important. All right, so let me get myself shrunk down here. So first things first, this is kind of an example of what I was talking about. This right here is not a current event. It's not a breaking news, nothing like that. It's just something that came across in my email inbox that I wanted to mention, and I'm not exactly sure why. It must have been attached to a headline or something, because I have Google alerts set up for a number of different keywords and topics like Opus Dei, obviously, and other human rights issues that I want to keep an eye on. So it just gives me a way to keep a finger on the pulse, and also it's really useful for these because I can just sit down, go through my email, look at everything I got for Google alerts from the past month, and that's honestly where I got a lot of this material from. And it's great because it gives me results from around the world. So I'm seeing results from South America and Europe and Asia and the United States, which is really awesome because I'm not just interested in solely a North American perspective, because this is a global phenomenon in this case. But this is a book, El Imperio del Opus Dei en Chile, which I am still working on becoming fluent in Spanish, but I know without having translated it that that means the Empire of Opus Dei in Chile. And this is just a Spanish book site where you could purchase it if you wanted to, and it gives a little bit of information about it, but I wanted to use this article here instead that I found on a blog that is like a little bit of a Q&A and then has more information about the book in general, and I thought that that would be good to read. And I want to highlight this because even though this didn't happen, this wasn't published recently in February, I want to highlight literature as much as I can about this topic, Opus Dei, and then just literature in general. I have a book that I'm going to mention here in a little while later on in the stream that I just think is an excellent book for the topics that I discuss, the issues that all of this stuff is connected to. And this book is another example, even though it was written in 2003, I believe, or 2004 is what it says here. I'd never heard of it, and I'm going to guess that that means that you probably haven't heard of it either. So let's learn a little bit about this book, the Opus Dei Empire in Chile, with insights by Maria Olivia Monkberg. And I apologize if I mispronounce any names in this. We all know the struggle is real for me. But this is just a summary. So Maria's book, The Empire of Opus Dei in Chile, published in 2003, offers an extensive examination of the Opus Dei movement's influence in Chile since its arrival in 1950. The author, a noted journalist with a history of opposition to the Pinochet regime, investigates the organization's secretive nature and its interaction with Chilean society. Maria's work seeks to illuminate the often overlooked power dynamics of Opus Dei, emphasizing how its members have integrated into the elite spheres of Chilean life while maintaining a strong internal culture governed by specific religious practices. Specifically concerning the influence of Opus Dei, it says that one of the key themes of Monkberg's investigation is the considerable power and impact of Opus Dei within Chilean society, particularly among the upper class. The book highlights how members of this movement, often remaining discreet about their identities, have established important connections and influence in educational and economic institutions. Maria provides detailed accounts of individual members and their roles in education and business, which reinforces the organization's societal position. The author notes that the beatification of Opus Dei's founder, Saint Jose Maria Escriva, in 2002 marked a pivotal change, encouraging members to adopt a more visible public profile and legitimizing the movement. Another significant focus of the book is on the rigorous lifestyle and practices followed by the members of Opus Dei. Her interviews reveal a complex relationship between personal commitment to Opus Dei's ideals and the severe expectations placed on members. This exploration raises questions about the motivations behind the commitment to such a structured and demanding lifestyle and the cultural implications this has on broader Chilean society, particularly regarding class and gender separations. Overall, Maria's book serves as a comprehensive journalistic account of the Opus Dei movement, of the Opus Dei movement's intricate web of influence in Chile, providing valuable insights in its historical roots and socioeconomic impact. While the book presents a well-documented narrative filled with first-hand accounts, it also exposes the challenges associated with critiquing such a powerful organization. By bringing attention to the often obscure workings of Opus Dei, Maria contributes to the understanding of religious culture in Chile and the factors that facilitate the movement's notable presence in elite circles. So there's a little FAQ section about this book and some other information, which of course you can find in my source document down below. So if you want to go and look through this a little bit more and all of the other stuff that we're going to go over today, because I'm probably not going to read everything in its entirety or we'll be here for hours and hours and hours, you can find it there. But I just wanted to mention this book because I had never heard of it, even though it was written in or published in 2004. And it's because it's Spanish and it's a Spanish book. And I looked and I didn't see an English translation of it anywhere. I kind of wonder if maybe this is one of those books that Opus Dei allegedly worked to bury, but who knows. I just wanted to mention it, and one day, perhaps a day soon, because I feel like I'm close to rounding a corner with my Spanish language learning, I'll be able to read the book in Spanish, hopefully, and be able to understand it. Speaking of books in other languages that are not available in English, there's actually some talk on the Opus Dei Exposed community on Reddit, which is an English speaking community of former members of Opus Dei, about getting some of these kind of more obscure books from other countries that are in languages other than English translated, at least in some part, onto Opus Dei Exposed, so that there's a way for people who maybe don't speak Polish or don't speak Spanish to be able to read these books, or at least parts of them. People have already done that on Opus Libris and on Opus Info. There's quite a bit of literature about Opus Dei and things that people have put up translating sections of books that people have written and articles and everything else. So there's definitely an effort being made to gather and collect and compile all of this information and get it available to a broader audience. So if you'd like to be a part of that, if you are someone from a country where you know Opus Dei is active, you know of a book maybe that was written in your native language that you know isn't available, and you're interested in getting it available to English-speaking folks, then feel free to shoot me an email, or you could even just post in the Opus Dei Exposed community, and people will be all over that and very excited to help and to get stuff translated, because there's a need for that, because the language barrier, I think, is one of the biggest reasons why more isn't really known about this organization, because they are somewhat small and so widespread around the world in so many different countries. It's kind of difficult to link everything together, especially because they have their whole disorganized organization thing going on, which also adds another layer of complexity. So anything that we can do to cut through the cobwebs and clarify things for everyone, I think, is a good thing. So anyway, there's that book. Let's move on. So this is a little bit of current news. I've mentioned in the past, I don't really love getting into politics too much, but unfortunately we live in a world that is governed by political bureaucrats, so it's going to impact our lives in some way, shape, or form. And while I do not live my life according to who is in political office, and I highly recommend that you do the same if you want to have any sanity or peace, because of the fact that these people can have an impact on our lives, whether we like it or not, I do think it's important to be informed and to at least be paying a little bit of attention, not have your head totally buried in the sand. And whenever something comes up news-wise that is connecting politics to my research niche, even though I am loath to discuss it because I find the entire thing a distasteful circus, I feel that I am obliged to at least acknowledge it. And so that is what we are going to do here with this article, which is from the Tucson Sentinel. The headline reads, "Put them in trauma, inside a key MAGA leader's plans for new Trump agenda." So hold on to your butts, because I'm sure this is not going to make people happy. A key ally to former President Donald Trump detailed plans to deploy the military in response to domestic unrest, defund the Environmental Protection Agency, and put career civil servants in trauma, in quotes, in a series of previously unreported speeches that provide a sweeping vision for a second Trump term. In private speeches delivered in 2023 and 2024, Russell Vought, who served as Trump's director of the Office of Management and Budget, described his work crafting legal justifications so that military leaders or government lawyers would not stop Trump's executive actions. He said the plans are a response to a, quote, Marxist takeover of the country, likened to the moment in 1776 and 1860 when the country was at war or on the brink of it, and said the timing of Trump's candidacy was a gift of God. So the Christian nationalism is fully out to play, isn't it? In my opinion, ProPublica and Documented obtained videos of the two speeches because, okay, I'm going to circle back just real quick. A gift of God. I guess that's a matter of opinion. You can have the opinion that a leader is a gift from God, if that's the perspective that you want to have, and that's your opinion and you're entitled to it. But it doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter what platform they are standing on and whether or not you support them or you think that they're completely abhorrent and corrupt. The simple truth of the matter is no person has the ability to be Christ on a cracker to the world. And I know that a lot of people really want a savior and really want someone to come in and soothe their brow and tell them that everything is going to be okay and get them a drink of water. But unfortunately, that's not the world that we live in, and that's not the reality that we have to contend with. And if you continuously look for that kind of thing in a leader, you are going to continuously put yourself at risk of being taken advantage of by grifters and by con men who are only interested in lining their own pockets and advancing their own self-interests. You see it, and this is not a simply political issue, by the way. This happens in politics, it happens in religion, and it happens in nearly every social setting that I can think of. In some way, shape, or form, that kind of thing manifests. There are always going to be people who are ready to take advantage of a person's desire to have a guarantee and assurance and safety and comfort and luxury and all, whatever it may be, whatever, fill in that blank, whatever it is for that person, whatever it may be, the promise of eternal life. You put yourself in the position to be taken advantage of by con men when you put your life and the things that happen to it at the feet of another human being. That's just my opinion. That's my soapbox on the issue. But whenever I hear somebody say that a human being is a gift from God in a sense that's beyond just like expressing like a nice, like, oh, you like, thank you so much, you're so kind, you're a gift from God, you're blessed, you know, outside of that, in like a grandiose sense, in a sense of like, oh, this person, this leader is just a gift from God. Given what I see in politics happening in our country today, I can't hear that without and not want to just roll my eyes straight into the back of my skull. But let's read on. ProPublica and Documented obtained videos of the two speeches Vought delivered during events for the Center for Renewing America, a Trump a pro-Trump think tank led by Vought. The think tank's employees or fellows include Jeffrey Clark, the former senior Justice Department lawyer who aided Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 election result, Ken Cuccinelli, I think I pronounced that right, a former acting deputy secretary in the Department of Homeland Security under Trump, and Mark Paoletta, a former senior budget official in the Trump administration. Other Trump allies, such as former White House advisor Steve Bannon and U.S. Reps Chip Roy and Scott Perry, either spoke or at the conferences or appeared. So this goes on, provides more details, but I want to know why I got tagged in it, because Opus Dei doesn't come up in it at all. But I want to mention it because it did come up, and I think I wanted to talk about it because there are all of these things that are happening around us, and they're very uncertain. And it's pretty clear, I think, if you just look around, that nobody actually knows what's going on, and everybody's kind of making it up as they go. But if you have studied history and you've looked, then the things that are happening in our society right now are not so strange and unfamiliar because they've all happened before. And in a news headline, you know, put them in trauma is in quotes there. And in this particular case, you know, they're talking about a group of people that they want to deal with in some way, shape, or form. But then I also saw something on the news the other day, and it was from that very interesting White House meeting that Trump had with Zelensky. And towards the end of it, you know, they had their entire back and forth, and it was like people were like talking over each other, interrupting each other to be heard. Not a very productive conversation by any means. But then at the end of it, Trump says, "This will make great TV." And on the one hand, it's like most likely, you know, the like simplest answer is usually the right one, which in this case would mean that all he meant by that was that like it's a spectacle, like we just created a spectacle here, and people are gonna watch that. But then at the same time, it's like, yeah, that's exactly what he's saying. We created a spectacle here, when the entire point of that meeting was, I would think, something else entirely. Don't live your life according to who's in political office if you want your life to have any peace. That's the takeaway from that article. And that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Opus Dei. That's just a download from the mothership, from above to you. All right, so last month we talked about Bishop Cipriani, who was basically kicked out of Peru, told to never return, ended up coming back to Lima to receive an award from the mayor of Lima, Peru. Cipriani is attached to Opus Dei. The mayor of Lima, Peru is attached to Opus Dei, and Cipriani is also attached to this other Catholic organization that was called the Sodalicio Christiane Vitae. And I'm speaking in the past tense because if you've seen that last live stream, or if you've been paying attention to religious news, you might have seen headlines saying that the organization, the Sodalicium, has basically been more or less dissolved by the Vatican due to all of the awful things that came out about the organization, the cult of personality that it erected around the founder, Louis Fagari, and a whole bunch of other really unsavory things, abuse, fraud, the list goes on. And it's very interesting because the things that were said about this Sodalicium are very, very similar to things that are being said about Opus Dei. They are a very similar organization. And so this is just a little bit more further development about Cipriani and what happened, and I just wanted to go over it. This was published at the end of January, so technically it's a January article, not a February one, but I didn't cover it. I didn't see it because of when I streamed and when I wrote up my sources and everything for that news analysis, so I wanted to just go through it really quick. And this just is, again, the fall of Cipriani, the cardinal of Opus Dei, accused of abuses that made Peru the laboratory of the ultra-church. It says the Vatican confirms the sanctions imposed against the Archbishop Emeritus of Lima, who denies the accusations despite the fact that he has been sanctioned for pedophilia and attacks Rome. Meanwhile, the Pope completes the dissolution of the Sodalicio. So let me see. Scanning. Peru, as Mexico used to be, starred in the marriage between neoconservative powers in the world of politics, business, the judiciary, and religion. It did so by hiding abuses, boosting the growth of radical organizations such as the Sodalicium or the Institute of the Incarnate Word. The first is about to be dissolved, the second has been intervened by Rome, and lashing out almost to extinction against liberation theology, also founded in Peru by theologian Gustavo Gutierrez, recently deceased. So I have, at the request of some of my subscribers here, started looking into Sodalicium, and I'm going to do a standalone. I'm planning on just doing one single standalone deep dive episode about Sodalicium and the foundation and growth and development of the organization, and then everything that ended up happening with it. Because similar to what I did with the Legionaries of Christ, when I kind of did a deep dive breakdown of that organization, when you see similarities like this, I think it's important to be very familiar with the situation, because I think when it comes to looking for ways to improve, ways to do things better in the future, ways to avoid remaking the same mistakes over and over and over again, you can learn a lot from these cases. And also, it illustrates the fact that Opus Dei is not anomalous or unusual for all of the fact that, you know, they hold themselves very much apart from every other organization in the church. There are lots of conservative Catholic organizations that are kind of culty in some ways, allegedly, according to former people who were involved. And a lot of the issues that we have seen reported cropping up in Opus Dei are also manifest in these other kind of like high control groups. And that's because high control groups tend to kind of follow the same playbook because it works and it's effective for getting people and keeping them under control. So let me hop and look at the chat really quick because it's been a hot minute. Let me see here. Michael Onyx said, new hairstyle is great. Thank you. I did the chop. It's going to be many months before I go to a barbershop again. So I decided to go a little bit shorter. But yeah, it's working for me. Said, just got to work, listening in. So happy that you guys can be here. Just tuning in and listening is totally fine. I posted something on the Deep Dive Project's Instagram page, which is the Deep Dive Project official, if you want to follow me there. But I posted something about how the Deep Dive Project is a podcast. Although I do film and convey my information in video format, just because I feel like it's the easiest with the kind of like information that I want to convey and how I want to do it. I feel like it's much more consumer friendly when it's in this format. It's really just a podcast, and that's really all that I ever intended it to be, was just episode podcast format. So just listening usually works pretty well, unless it's like a deep dive episode and where I'm showing videos and pictures and that kind of thing, because sometimes that stuff is nice to see. But it's cool now with, this is a tangent, but it's cool now with like Spotify, for example. You can upload a podcast as a video and people can leave comments on it, and you can have polls underneath it and different kind of interactive things for people, which I just think is really cool. I think that Spotify is trying to provide an alternative to YouTube and other video streaming platforms that aren't perhaps as great. And I think that that's fantastic. So something worth mentioning. If you ever want to start a podcast, I highly recommend Spotify. Michael said, I will never understand how a country that has the best universities in the world, that wins the most Nobel Prizes, etc., elects someone like Trump. I think that you can understand a lot about human behavior when you understand that and this is just my opinion, coming as someone who just spends a lot of time thinking about people, okay? I'm not a psychologist, and this is not mental health advice or anything like that. I'm not a psychiatrist. This is just my opinion as a person moving through the world who kind of is making a living out of observing the things that are happening around me. I think people's behavior becomes a lot easier to understand when you realize that it's coming a lot of the time. When it's, especially when it's nonsensical, you can't really understand it, and it's not, you can't draw a line to something concrete. A lot of the time, it's because of fear, or other like very strong emotions like that. But honestly, a lot of the time, I think it's because of fear or a derivative of it, and that fear is manufactured a lot of the time in people. There are, as you know, people and organizations that make it their full-time job to figure out how to disturb and disrupt people and create a narrative that people will buy into. I mean, if you are in the United States, or you like paying attention to American pop culture and like Hollywood news and that kind of thing, there's a situation playing out in Hollywood right now that's a perfect example of that. Like, there's documentary evidence of that happening between Justin Baldoni and Blair, what is her name? I can't remember the blonde actress's name, and it's not, I've enjoyed her movies. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, and I've seen every single episode of Gossip Girl, but I can't remember her name. Anyway, between Justin Baldoni and the woman who co-directed It Ends With Us, and there's a lawsuit, and it's been very dramatic, and I'm not going to get into all of it here because it's just too much of a rabbit hole. But in documents that have come out because of the lawsuit, evidentiary type things, it has come out like text message exchanges basically between Justin Baldoni and this team that he hired to do crisis mitigation or something like that. And the text messages, they're like kind of giggling and going back and forth, talking about how like they can get people to believe whatever they want to believe. Blake Lively, thank you, not Blair, Blake Lively. They can get you to believe whatever you want to believe, and like they can create a narrative, and they can really convince people, and like it's kind of funny, ha ha ha, like making light of the fact that they make a living out of fooling the public. That kind of thing happens all of the time, and people end up in information silos, bubbles. They don't necessarily maybe challenge themselves as much as they think that they are, or in ways that are maybe as meaningful as they should be. And people's life journeys are uniquely their own. You know, it's important to remember that nobody sees the world in the way that I see it, and the way that you see it. You and I see two completely different versions of reality, and we can come together on common issues, and we can find common ground, and that's the basis for democracy and how societies are built. But at the end of the day, we are having very drastically different experiences, and those drastically different experiences, combined with the fear and combined with the active attacks being made to sway and control a group of people with a narrative, combine to create a real mess. And I think that a lot of the things that have happened throughout world history, particularly when it comes to politics and governments and the movements of nations, can kind of be boiled down to that, especially at least I would say post World War II. I feel like that has definitely become the case. Read through a couple more comments here, and then we'll get on with it. Michael said, another order from the Opus Sphere Institute of Christ the King Sovereign Priest. Rebecca, please take a look at these people. Okay, I'll write that down. I am always, always, always happy to take suggestions for situations to look into, people, organizations, whatever, because I only have my own two eyeballs, and I can only be so many places at once, and there's things, you know, you don't know what you don't know. I'm learning new things all the time. So anytime there's something you think I should look into, let me know. That name does not exactly roll off the tongue. Compared to some of these religious organizations' names, I mean, Opus Dei is like downright elegant, truly, compared to some of these names. All right. I'm gonna leave the chat for the meantime. I'm gonna get back to reading these articles because we gotta keep cooking. All right, so in addition to reading articles that are critical of Opus Dei, I think it's important to also read articles coming from the horse's mouth, not necessarily because I find them particularly revolutionary or enlightening or eye-opening, but it's important to know what people are saying. It's important to have a complete picture, not put yourself in an information bubble. And this one is a good one to focus on. I mean, Opus Dei, they publish articles worldwide on their many different website platforms all day, every day. So they're definitely, I don't necessarily think they're all worth reading, but this one is a press release from the regional vicar in Peru. And I believe it is specifically discussing, let's see. Yeah, Cipriani. So let's read what the regional vicar for Opus Dei in Peru has to say about this situation. All right. I mean, it's interesting. They updated or is this backwards? Is it February 3rd? Yeah, February 3rd of 2025 was when this was published. As regional vicar for Opus Dei in Peru, I would like to comment on the serious accusations that have appeared in the press against Cardinal Juan Luis Cipriani, Archbishop Emeritus of Lima. In addition to inviting you to read a clarification that the Cardinal published, I would like to share with you some considerations. In the years when he was incarnated in Opus Dei as a priest, 1977 to 1988, the then Father Juan Luis Cipriani undertook wide-reaching, generous pastoral work with thousands of faithful young and old in our country until he was made a bishop by Pope John Paul II in 1988. On a separate topic, and as regional vicar, I apologize wholeheartedly if I did not respond with full availability to someone who wished to be heard. In 2018, his accuser requested a meeting with me. I knew that I could not interfere in a formal accusation that had already been lodged with the Holy See, as is the correct procedure in the case of a cardinal. Since I did not have any juridical competence for the case, when someone in the accuser's confidence asked me to hold a meeting with him, my reaction was to think that such a meeting could not be positive. Today I realize that I could have offered him personal human and spiritual contact, which in fact I know that he did receive from other people in Opus Dei. I would also like to state clearly that there is no record of any formal process during the years when Father Juan Luis Cipriani was incarnated in Opus Dei as a priest. And I'm not really sure why that's supposed to make us feel better. Only because whether or not there was, any formal process, like they're saying, really has no bearing on whether or not anything actually happened, right? With the Prelature's Global Safeguarding Guidelines, updated in 2020, today it would be impossible for any complaint to go unrecorded. Let's hope so. Back then, there was not the same awareness as there is today on the best ways of accompanying those involved. Currently, after a learning process on the part of the whole church, there is a clearer pathway for every accusation, and any such complaint could not remain at the level of private conversations with some people who had since died and others who cannot be identified. In this context, we renew our commitment to work for prevention and to keep learning the best possible way of handling accusations and accompanying those involved. I did not want to end without restating my solidarity, which will never be sufficient, with those who have suffered any kind of abuse inside or outside the church. Now, I have been vocally critical of Opus Dei stuff, press releases, and that kind of thing before. Clearly, I make no secret of the fact, and I will call out that kind of thing when I see it. There are a couple of things that I see in this statement that I find kind of strange, that just, I don't know. Let me know in the chat what you think. This, no record of any formal process during the years when Cipriani was in Opus Dei as a priest. Okay, big whoop, so what? And then he's saying that, you know, the kinds of things that happened would now be impossible. It'd be impossible for anything to go unrecorded. And we have to take his word for that, and I suppose time will tell. And I guess I just wish that I had more confidence. I guess I wish that I felt better about that. Again, I suppose time will tell. But that being said, I do appreciate the fact that he apologized. He said, "I apologize wholeheartedly if I did not respond with full availability." And he acknowledges the fact that there was someone who wanted to meet with him, and for whatever reason, maybe there were the reasons that he listed here, maybe there was some other reason, we don't know, that's between him and God, that didn't happen. And now, in retrospect, he realizes that that was probably an error. And I think that that kind of honest acknowledgement and apology is refreshing to see. And I hope that we see more of it coming out of Opus Dei with time. I think in the past, I personally have found their responses to things kind of arrogant, and I would like to see a little bit more compassion. So maybe that will come. We'll see. But there you go. A little bit of information about Opus Dei from Opus Dei's own website, and I'm not completely eviscerating this guy. See? It's not all bad over here, okay? We are critically engaged. All right, we're going to talk about Cardinal Cipriani some more. This situation is a big deal. There's been a lot of news coverage about it, and I want to make sure that we give it our due diligence. Plus, this is going to tie into the research that I'm doing with Sodalicio, so it's kind of killing two birds with one stone for me. But this is from the Catholic News Agency. They explain the sexual abuse accusation case against Cardinal Cipriani. I thought that this would be really good to go over because we have looked at a couple of things already, different articles referencing these accusations, but we haven't really gotten any type of specifics. So maybe this will give us a little bit more information to go on. This was published on February 3rd at 1350 by Eduardo Berdeo. A recent article published by the Spanish newspaper El País reported an accusation of alleged sexual abuse against Peruvian Cardinal Juan Luis Cipriani that supposedly occurred in 1983 when he was a priest incarnated in Opus Dei. The cardinal has denied the accusation. Born in Lima in 1943, Cipriani was ordained a priest of Opus Dei in August 1977. He was incarnated in the prelature until May 1988, when he was named by John Paul II as auxiliary bishop of this lovely place that I'm sure is beautiful and sounds lovely if you know how to pronounce it, a diocese that was then at the epicenter of terrorism by the Shining Path Maoist guerrilla group. In May 1995, he was named Archbishop of that ecclesiastical see, and in January 1999, he was named Archbishop of Lima. In February 2001, he was created a cardinal, becoming the first cardinal formed in the Opus Dei apostolate. Woo! In January 2019, Pope Francis accepted his resignation as Archbishop of Lima when he turned 75. Following his resignation, Cipriani withdrew from the Peruvian public scene in which he had been active since his years as a bishop. However, last week, his name turned up in the media again due to the article in El País. Below is a chronology of the case involving the Peruvian Archbishop. So it begins with the accusation, which was published on January 24th, claiming that Pope Francis had forced Cipriani to resign as head of the Archdiocese of Lima due to an accusation of inappropriate touching that he allegedly committed in 1983 with a teenager who is now 58 years old. According to the newspaper, ecclesiastical sources in Lima stated the alleged victim wrote a letter to Pope Francis in 2018. In addition, this person claims that he reported the abuse to Opus Dei when it happened, but that the prelature did nothing. On January 25th, Cipriani published a letter responding to El País in which he denied the accusations, saying that, quote, "It is a serious matter that information should be published in a partial manner that appears to come from confidential documentation held by the Holy See that I do not even have in my possession," end quote. The cardinal said that in August 2018 he was informed of a complaint, but that it was never handed to him. He also claimed that in December 2019, without any proceedings being opened against him, the Apostolic Nuncio verbally informed me that the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith had imposed a series of penalties on me, limiting my priestly ministry. In addition, he was asked to live outside of Peru and remain silent on the matter. The Archbishop Emeritus also related that in February 2020, he had an audience with Pope Francis, and he said the Pope allowed him to resume his pastoral duties. Likewise, on January 25th, the regional vicar of Opus Dei in Peru, Father Gomez Hortiguela, reported in a statement that there is no record of any formal process during the years in which, as a priest, Father Cipriani was incarnated in Opus Dei. However, he admitted that in 2018, he did not accept a request to meet with the complainant because, quote, he knew that he could not interfere with a formal accusation already initiated by the Holy See. Let's see. So then on January 26th, the director of the Vatican Press Office confirmed that after resigning as Archbishop of Lima, Cipriani received a penal precept with certain disciplinary measures regarding his public activity, place of residence, and use of insignia. Although on specific occasions, certain permissions were granted to respond to requests due to the age and family situation of the cardinal, at present, this precept remains in force. Let's see. And then on January 29th, Cipriani released a second letter in which he basically reiterated everything that he said in the first letter, and that he was obliged to clarify that when the nuncio in Peru transmitted to me the precept with which the congregation limited some of my faculties, I signed it, declaring in writing at the same time that the accusation was absolutely false. Cipriani also reiterated that he had not been able to defend himself against the accusation and charged that he is the object of a campaign of attempted harassment and destruction of his dignity and honor. At the time of publication of this article, the Vatican has not officially reported whether any criminal proceedings have been carried out against the Peruvian cardinal. And as of reading this right now, on the 3rd of March, I don't believe I saw anything. I don't believe there's a headline in here saying that, but I also, I feel like I would have definitely had that up top if I saw that the Vatican had chosen to charge Cipriani. So as of yet, nothing more has happened. I don't really know that that article really gave me any new information that I didn't already know. And also, for my own sanity, I'm going to start closing these tabs that we've already looked at. I simply must, for my own sanity. Make me feel like I'm making some headway. Alrighty, so moving on. This is from a news site called Religion Digital. It's about Sodalicio. I wanted to read this given my interest in it and recent news. This was published on the 2nd or the 3rd of February. The prophetic criticism of Jose Luis Perez Guadalupe. So, this is translated from Spanish to English using Google Translate, just the function that you get when you right-click on a page and hit translate. And it's pretty good, but if you heard my last live stream, then you know that that one article that I read was a struggle, because it does a pretty good job with the translations, but it messes up the tenses sometimes. It also doesn't seem to be able to do to translate gendered language. So translating like Spanish, it'll just translate everything to like male basically instead of like female. So if the article's about a woman, it'll say it's like about a man the entire time you're reading it. It is what it is. So we're gonna do our best to get through this, and it'll just be what it'll be, and we'll take what we can get out of it. But I wanted to read this. So Jose Guadalupe is quite a character. He has academic degrees of graduate and master's in sacred theology from the Faculty of Pontifical and Civil Theology of Lima, a degree in social sciences, a master's degree in criminology, a master's degree in anthropology, and what else? He got that at Pontifical Catholic University of Peru, a PhD in Pontifical Science and Sociology. So he is smart. Oh no, do I have to join anything? Okay, good. I saw the green and I thought it was going to make me join something to read the rest of it. A lot of news articles now are behind a paywall, and like I get it because we all got to make that coin, but Man, it makes the information hard to get to. Starting in 1986, he served as a prison pastoral agent at the Lurigancho Penitentiary Establishment. This experience led him to carry out investigations in the penitentiary and criminological field, which resulted in the year 2011 being entrusted with the presidency of the National Penitentiary Institute, which he held until February 2015, when he was appointed Minister of the Interior at the Ollanta Humala government, culminating this commission in July 2016. But he was also one of those to whom the Sodalicio personally declared war, declaring him the enemy of the institution. Since those years in the 80s, when he was a simple theology student like me at the Faculty of Pontifical and Civil Theology of Lima, it was colloquially known as the devil among us Sodalites. In September 1992, the Peruvian Episcopal Conference published the book, Why Are Catholics Leaving? The Problem of Religious Migration, From Catholics to So-Called Sects. Although this book focused on what Perez Guadalupe calls new religious movements, NMR, mostly the evangelical imprint, it also included, in one part, a criticism of certain Catholic movements, including the Catholic Charismatic Renewal, the Neo-Ecumenical Way, and the Sodalicium Christianae Vitae for its sectarian characteristics, or rather, something may have gotten cut out. The criticism of Sodalicio was not due to abuses committed, of which nothing would be publicly known until the year 2000. Jose Enrique Escardo wrote a series of articles in the magazine Gente, announcing for the first time abuses that he himself had suffered in the institution. Perez Guadalupe, without considering Sodalicio necessarily as something bad, highlighted, in the framework of a general criticism that included other Catholic movements, its exclusive and elitist character, which was not combined with the essence of what is Catholic. What does that sound like? So anyway, this article is really good. I'm going to read just one little excerpt where he kind of fleshes out this idea, because I don't want to drag my feet here on this live stream. Let's see. So he says this here, which I just think is good. It says, although I personally prefer not to use the term Catholic sects, but rather that of Catholic elites, indicating that this is the group attitude of superiority over other Catholics, it is indisputable that the number of Catholic authors who have not only begun to speak of sectarian attitudes within the Church, but even call our apostolic movements sects, increases. There is no doubt that there are some groups within the Church that are creating problems precisely because of their closed and exclusive attitude. It would be necessary to investigate here to what extent these groups are forming small churches within the Catholic, or to what extent these groups moderately are the future of our Catholic ministry. I just think that that is a really astute and well-phrased observation, and I think it's spot on. And I just really appreciate the fact that he's pointing out that this is like a one of two ways kind of situation. On the one hand, these organizations that you see kind of developing and gaining popularity within the Catholic Church right now are definitely not necessarily perfectly in line with, you know, you could say every single aspect of the Roman Catholic Church as a whole, like Roman Catholic Church TM. But at the same time, the world is changing. The Catholic Church, in some way, shape, or form, is going to have to be able to at least flex to change with, to be able to move with the changing times, not if not to change with them, which, you know, is a huge argument within the Catholic Church, and one that I've been hearing since I was a very young child. You know, the unchanging nature of the Catholic Church is what makes it so appealing to a lot of Catholics. But yet at the same time, like I say, the times are changing, and there is a conversation to be had about whether or not these organizations are in some way, shape, or form the future of the Catholic Church, and what that means if that is the case. Interesting stuff. We'll look at the chat real quick while that next article gets pulled up. Let's see. I'm just reading the chat. I'm sorry, I'm quiet. You guys are talking about some weird movie called Opus. So apparently there's a new movie starring John, is it Malkovich? Is that how you pronounce his name? Called Opus. And Ohm said it looks weird as hell. And somebody asked if it's animated or not. And Ohm said, I just saw a commercial and I have no idea what's going on. It's just weird. There are some like little cartoons and like short like kind of kid movies that someone in Opus Dei, working for Opus Dei, or they had these made. Someone in Opus Dei had these like little educational cartoons made, and I've seen one that I think it's about like, it's like a cartoon about like Jose Maria Escriva's childhood and young adult life and everything. There was a company that made like educational movies like that about like the lives of the saints, for example, that I watched, man, so often growing up. I can't remember what those were called. We had so many VHS tapes of these different, like, it was like each was a standalone story, I think. I can't remember what it's called. Let me look through this chat again. But there's some weird like little cartoons out there that somebody on Opus Dei's, ostensibly on Opus Dei's behalf, put together, and I guess some of them kind of look like nightmare fuel, if I'm being perfectly honest. The budget was low. Someone should finally do some thorough research on the relationship between male celibacy and pedophilic tendencies. They did. Back in the 90s, actually. The data, or even the 80s, maybe. The data has been out for a really, really long time. There's a gentleman whose name was Dr. Richard Sipe, and he has since passed away, unfortunately, sadly. May he rest his soul. But he wrote this book in the 90s, and even though it's an older book, it is still, I think, perfectly applicable to things that we see playing out in our society today, and like within the Catholic Church, but just within society as a whole. And it was called Sex, Priests, and Secret Codes, the Catholic Church's 2,000-year paper trail of abuse. If you can get your hands on a copy, I would highly recommend checking it out and seeing if you can read it, get a copy at your library, whatever. It's really, really educational and illuminating, eye-opening. He shares data from different studies that have been done on celibate individuals, people living a celibate lifestyle. He also goes through a lot of old documents, church documents from different councils that happened over the centuries, and different orders and decisions that were made around how clergy should live in the Catholic Church, and whether or not clergy could have families or get married and that kind of thing. And it's really, really interesting because, come to find out, when you get down to the brass tacks of it, this stuff's been happening for a really, really long time. 2,000 years in the Catholic Church's case anyway, but I think it's a plague that has existed within our society from the earliest days, sadly. So, Sex, Priests, and Secret Codes. If you haven't read it, check it out. All right. Let's hit back to the news. Translate to English. Yes, please. So this is an article featuring an interview with Monica Terribas, who, come on, translate for me. I need the help. There we go. Who's the director and, the director of the Heroic Minute. I also left Opus Dei, which premiered on Max at the beginning of the month of February. So if you haven't seen it, you can find it. I also saw somebody mentioned on r/Opus Dei Exposed that it's available in the United States now as well. So you don't have to go to some sketchy site to watch it. You should be able to find it. But anyway, this is a really, really good article, and I wanted to share some of the things that she had to say. So, scrolling down here a little bit, this is just talking about the release dates of the episodes. It's 13 women from different regions of Spain, Latin America, Ireland, and the United Kingdom give direct testimony of their lives in Opus Dei and their subsequent break with the institution. And then in an interview with ACN, Toribus said that Opus Dei has not respected freedom. She said, when you take the freedom of people, you lose humanity. So I thought this would be good just to give background on the reason for the docuseries in the first place, if you didn't know. And I didn't know a whole lot of background about this just because wasn't what I was paying attention to when the press was initially being released about this show. I was down a different rabbit hole. But this article, which was published on February 4th, says, the idea of the documentary series arose when Toribus received an email from a woman explaining everything she had lived within Opus Dei, and the journalist wanted to know her. From there, see, this is a perfect example. It should be, I am 100% sure it should be she, but it translated it to he. From there, she contacted people from different generations and countries who explained the same and realized that everything they recounted, as seen in the series, was systemic. Witnesses narrate their firsthand experiences. Toribus points out that all of them are very capable and intelligent, and that they have suffered a lot. They have gone through a psychological process and passed it, and are with the head and encouragement to explain it. See, dicey translations. It's really tough sometimes, but she makes sure she didn't put anyone vulnerable on the screen. Quote, I've spoken to many women who have not made the recovery process of leaving the work, but all the people who are on screen explain what they have experienced, have made an intellectual process of understanding what they have happened to them and overcome it. Another feature in common is that they do not speak from rage and revenge. She wants to help other people, and many retain faith. Let's see. Beyond direct witnesses, the documentary also has the participation of investigative journalist Gareth Gore, Antonia Cundy, Laura Marino, Vega Gonzalez, John Paul Lennon. So these are like experts in their fields, right, who are providing additional insight, context for the docuseries. She stressed that she wanted the prelator of Opus Dei to participate until the last moment, and that the prelate, Fernando Ocaires, answered the witnesses of the protagonists, quote, I didn't want another numerary or auxiliary numerary to appear saying they're happy on working in the work. It's as if a child is abused in school and interviews also those who haven't been abused. Our obligation is to ask for responsibility to whom it has been the ability to change things, and that is the prelator of Opus Dei. Toribus has made sure that Opus Dei will answer through its communication channels. And we'll get into a little bit of Opus Dei's response to this thing, but it's more or less what you would kind of expect. All right. So this is another article, and I just want to mention it. I'm not sure how much of it I'm going to be able to read. I was looking at it the other day when I was putting together my source document, and the translation is just not good. If anybody has any suggestions that are not AI for something besides Google Translate, some type of like plugin, maybe web plugin that you can use to translate things, let me know. Something that works better than the automatic like Google Translate, because I would love to give it a try. Because so many of these articles, they have such good bones, but it's really hard to read the translation because it's not flawless. But I wanted to mention this because this was published on a news site on, February 6th. Written by Miguel Galindo, and the headline is, I'm a lesbian and I'm leaving. An ex-numerary remembers her very hard departure from Opus Dei. This is about a woman named Fatima Navarro. And I wanted to mention this because you don't really see a whole lot of LGBTQ plus representation for whatever reason, good, bad, or indifferent. I'm not going to get into it. You just really don't. So I wanted to mention this just because I think it illustrates the fact that despite the fact that these people may come from similar economic backgrounds, people who end up in Opus Dei they're a diverse group of people from different places in the world, different walks of life, different perspectives, different orientations even. And I think that it's important to acknowledge that, just because I think it's important to create visibility for people who are different, or people who have been marginalized, especially. So let's see how much of this we can kind of get through. Maybe it won't be too bad. The institution of Opus Dei is one of the Catholic organizations with the most members worldwide, and a way of life shared by a large number of faithful around the world. The secrets surrounding this institution and the extortion suffered by some of its members and workers have caused many people who have left the organization to speak years after the abuses and lack of freedoms they suffered, where they were within this non-exempt Catholic foundation of controversies. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, actually. The docuseries The Heroic Minute, I Also Left Opus Dei, reveals the abuses suffered by 13 women. Its director, Monica Toribas, and the former auxiliary numerary Fatima Navarro have attended Window, which I'm guessing is maybe what this translates to, I don't know, to talk about the series that opens this Friday, February 7th at Max. Navarro has had the opportunity to tell in the Carles Francino program how her departure from the institution was after trying to leave many times. Quote, "It was very hard for me. It was a very important challenge because I opened two doors, the one with the Opus exit and the exit of the closet. Then, of course, they are two difficult doors, and when I said that I was leaving, that I had already made the decision because I had already had several crises, what I did was in the latter that I already knew was the definitive one, not to tell anything. I kept quiet until I said I'm leaving," she acknowledges, because other times when she had hesitated to leave, Opus had done everything possible to keep her. "When I became aware I recognized myself as a homosexual, I was a lesbian, and I had already knew that I wanted to go, that there was no going back, I said, I'm a lesbian and I am leaving. The organization's numerary number has told between 1988 and 2008. I'm not exactly sure what that means." Navarro acknowledges that she was very sorry because she had to say goodbye to people with whom she had lived for many years and whom she loves very much. Navarro recalls that the news generated a lot of discontent within Opus Dei, and that she agreed to enter a center in the field for a month just because she felt bad that she had made that decision. "That month that I was there was torture, terrible torture. Every day I had there either the priest or the numerary telling me that this was unnatural," recalls the ex-numerary, who had to endure comments like she was a pervert or they were going to condemn her. "When the priest told me that this was unnatural, I said to him, 'And celibacy is not unnatural?' And I answer that it depends. It depends." So, yeah, that was actually way easier to read than I thought. I just wanted to read it to share her experience. I wanted to highlight the fact that she exists, and I wanted to highlight what she was exposed to because of the fact that she said she wanted to leave, and also because of the fact that she was brave enough to say that she was lesbian, to come out of the closet, as it were, to Opus Dei, which sounds just like an absolute nightmare. I wouldn't want that organization to know anything about me. And they end up knowing way too much, it seems. But Fatima, I hope that you are in a better place. I hope that you have found happiness and peace and joy and love. And I hope that you know now that the things that happened were not your fault. All right, here's another article from, I think this is CNA, but for Portugal. This is Portuguese to English, which can be one of the most difficult, so we'll see how this goes. But I wanted to read it because this is Opus Dei responding to labor exploitation charges in Mexico. Last month, we went over an article discussing these individuals coming forward, alleging very similar treatment to what has been alleged playing out in Argentina and other places around the world as well, like the UK and Ireland and so on. So, like with the Opus Dei article that we looked at earlier, I think it's really important to pay attention to what this organization says and does when it makes sense. And I think this is a time where it definitely makes sense, because this whole labor exploitation, alleged labor exploitation and human trafficking is something that I am I mean, it's the only reason that I'm talking about this organization, to be perfectly frank. So this was published on February 6th by Diego Lopez Collin, and I'll get right into it. Opus Dei in Mexico has denied allegations of exploitation, reduced serfdom, and human trafficking made by 3 women who denounced the organization in a report by a local media outlet. Quote, Opus Dei categorically denies the accusations of human trafficking and labor exploitation made in this complaint, quote, end quote, says a statement from the Opus Dei Communications Office in Mexico. At the same time, Opus Dei Communication Advisory in Mexico reaffirms its commitment to cooperate fully with the justice system to clarify the facts and resolve the situation fairly and transparently. Opus Dei was founded on October 12th, 1928 by Jose Maria. We already know St. John Paul II made it a personal prelature, and then Pope Francis did some things, and let's see. So the article published by the news site Political Animal on January 28, there are testimonies of 3 women who were auxiliary numeraries. It's so funny how it'll translate it to the most random things, like sometimes auxiliary cash, sure. Auxiliary numeraries, and who between 1993 and 2007 would have been recruited by Opus Dei with the promise of education and job opportunities. An auxiliary numerary of Opus Dei is a celibate woman who is professionally dedicated to domestic work and the maintenance of the centers of the organization, considering this work her vocation and the means of sanctification. Let's see. On the same day as the publication of the report, Opus Dei's communication office in Mexico released a statement in which it regrets the negative experiences of whistleblowers and says that the institution's priority is to, quote, listen and establish a channel of dialogue to understand each experience individually, end quote, which sounds pretty par for course. They also says that it does not imply accepting the accusations, considering that it presents an unfair decontextualization of the life, work, and training received by some of the women of Opus Dei and the vocation freely chosen by auxiliary numeraries. An unfair decontextualization, huh? According to data from Opus Dei, about 4,000 women in the world choose to be auxiliary numeraries as part of their personal achievement, as part. The experience of this way of life is as adverse as the people who freely and consciously decided to live it and witness it, the statement reads. Is there more? Let's see. So one of the plaintiffs said, I never saw checks or envelopes with cash, nor did I know how much I earned, although we were told that the people we served paid for all services, one of the plaintiffs said. And then it gets into talking about the situation coming out in Argentina. Opus Dei's press response, PR response to that was pretty much the same. I mean, nothing new under the sun, but it's where I just wanted to mention it. Let's see. 7 down. And then this is regarding the premiere of the docuseries The Heroic Minute, Opus Dei's press response. This is on the English language Opus Dei site. The entertainment platform HBO Max has released a docuseries featuring interviews with women who recount negative experiences. I don't think that's what it was. During their time in Opus Dei, many of which have already been made public. In response to the feelings they express, the experiences they share, and the suffering they describe, we reiterate our sorrow and respect, which we also extend to any others who may feel identified with these accounts. It's a really strange way of saying we're sorry if you had a bad time. As members of Opus Dei, we seek, amid our mistakes and successes, to do good and to imitate Jesus Christ in our daily lives. Nothing could be further from our intentions than to cause harm to others, especially to those who are or have been a part of the work, with whom we are often connected through bonds of family or friendship. In cases where harm has nonetheless been caused, we are deeply sorry. In many cases, criticism from former members has prompted institutional reflection, leading to improvements and changes in the way we do things, and we have personally asked for forgiveness. We hope to be able to do the same in situations where this has not yet been possible. So, they say the focus of the docuseries does not reflect the reality of Opus Dei. It portrays the work in a biased manner as an organization driven by malicious intent to harm others. This depiction is false and completely opposed to the teachings of Saint Jose Maria, as can be seen in the lives of thousands of people who experience or have experienced fulfillment and personal growth in Opus Dei, finding God in their ordinary life. Why don't you just save the text and just say, we're sorry if some people somewhere have had bad experiences, but like there's a lot of people and most of them aren't having bad experiences, so like we don't really understand what you're upset about. Because that's basically it. From my point of view, having just read this, that's kind of how it sounds to me. Saying it shows like a biased perspective of the organization. As an organization driven by malicious intent to harm others. Well, here's the thing. And I've said this so many times in the past, but it bears repeating. You know, the vast majority of the people in Opus Dei probably are very holy, well-intentioned, pure people. People who are there because they have bought in lock, stock, and barrel to the entire concept of sanctifying their work through daily life and everything that that entails, up to and including all of these various very serious commitments that you can make to this organization. Portrays the work in a biased manner. Very likely, the vast majority of people in Opus Dei will never see the types of abuses that people who were also involved in the organization are now alleging. I mean, compare it to a different type of situation, but you know, to use myself as an example, I grew up and went to so many different Catholic churches, interacted with so many different clergy, priests, cardinals, monks, nuns, and I never had a bad experience with a religious person, and I never witnessed anyone else having a bad experience with a religious person or somebody representing the Catholic Church. But I'm not stupid enough to think that just because I didn't see those things happen, that means that they have never happened anywhere or aren't happening now. That is an incredibly narrow perspective to take of things. And it's very, I understand because it's very difficult, you know, if you're looking around and everyone's going, well, we're having such a great time, we just don't understand why people are upset, because we are having a great time. Even if that is true, if you are invested in whatever it is where the accusations are being made, whether it be an organization or a company or a group of friends or whatever, if you are there for the right reasons, for the, you know, altruistic reasons that would ostensibly bring someone to Opus Dei, for example, surely that would also mean that you want to take the time to thoughtfully and carefully and critically look at these accusations and give them their due diligence, if for no other reason than to determine beyond the shadow of a doubt that there really isn't any truth to them. But that's not happening. You're just getting walls of word salad and some sort of lukewarm sentiments and outright denial from a whole lot of other people. And I get it, because you see it happen in every sector, not just religious. You know, people have a bad habit of assuming that if they can't see something, or if something isn't happening right in front of them, then maybe it's not a problem, or maybe it's just, you know, the things that they are being told seem credible and seem reliable, and they can think of no reason and have no reason to question it, so they just go with it. There's all different reasons why. And so from that perspective, I can understand why someone would look at the Heroic Minute and say, well, this work is this this docuseries is just so biased. It's just showing such a biased point of view. Like, it's not showing any of the good things. Like, I am having such a great experience, you know, me, like, from the point of view of this hypothetical person. Like, I'm having such a great experience going to the center and having these, like, weekly chats with this new spiritual director that I have. I love that I have someone who's, like, interested in my spiritual development as a person and as a Catholic. And, like, I feel like they're going to help me grow closer to God, and I'm making friends, and it's so wonderful. And I don't understand why anyone would want to tear this thing down. It must just be the devil and the fact that the world is just mad about the Catholic Church existing. Do you see where that train of thought starts to just kind of fall apart? There's a duality here that can exist. You can have two things at once. You can have an organization that is able to provide some pretty incredible experiences to people. Otherwise, people would not be interested in committing to it, right? While also contributing to, enabling, permitting, whatever adverb you want to use, some really, really unfortunate situations and circumstances. Those two things can exist at once, and we have to be able to contend with them. You have to. The documentary also makes other allegations that the prelature categorically denies. There has never been any form of uninformed or forced recruitment, trafficking, reduction to servitude, or an abusive system designed to manipulate people. These claims are distortions of the formation or vocation freely chosen by some women. I want to meet the first I want to meet somebody, anybody who all of a sudden was just like, I don't know, sitting at home quietly praying, sitting in church, whatever, and then all of a sudden, like a bolt of lightning or whatever, all of a sudden was like, I need to join Opus Dei. I have a vocation to Opus Dei, without first being told that they had a vocation by somebody already in the organization. I want to meet them. Please, I would love to meet that person. But then also saying that there has never been any form of uninformed or forced, all of the below. And I'm just kind of wondering about that from like a legal perspective, because, and this is not me making any like accusations or anything like that. I'm just asking the question because I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just wondering if they can say something like that when they have been taken to court. The organization and individuals who were ostensibly representing the organization were actually taken to a court of law and convicted in a court of law of labor exploitation and what is ostensibly like labor trafficking, people not being paid or being forced to work long hours without proper rest or compensation. I mean, those are all things that were proven. Again, this is not me making an accusation. These are all things that were proven to have happened in France at a French hospitality school center in the court case in 2016, Tissier v. Opus Dei. And the organization was convicted, and individuals who were in the organization were convicted and were ordered to pay fines, several thousands of euros worth of fines, for labor exploitation in the case of Catherine Tissier and 99 other domestic workers. So I'm really just wondering, like, can they truly say that with their full chest and have that be true, that there has never been any form of uninformed or forced recruitment, trafficking, reduction to servitude, or an abusive system designed to manipulate people, when there is a court case that at least, I mean, perhaps globally, you know, they can say that categorically, you know, within the organization globally, there is no such thing. But at least in one place at one point in time, not that long ago, that was the case. That did happen, and it was proven. Kind of weird. I don't know. Let me know in the chat what you think, because I find that strange. I'm not going to read any more of this. It's kind of what we've heard before. Let's see. So this is from a German site. And is this the blog? There's something I'm going to look at. Nope. this is, you can see the whole thing. There's something I'm going to look at in a minute that I think is from Hungary, and it's from like somebody's personal blog or whatever, and the entire, you can only read like the first couple of paragraphs, which I'm going to read because they're interesting, but you can't read the whole thing. Oh well, it is what it is. You'll have that, like they say. So this was published on the 8th of February. Marcus Hoffman becomes the new city dean of Bonn. Quote, bringing people into contact with Jesus. Bonn gets a new city dean. Monsignor Marcus Hoffman is appointed to the federal city by the Archbishop of Cologne Rainier Maria Cardinal Wolecki in March. In an interview, Hoffman talks about Bonn and his personal spirituality. Where do you think that's going? When they start mentioning their personal spirituality, where do you think we're going? I can tell you. So this is by Renardo Schlegelmilch. And I'm sorry if I did not pronounce your last name correctly. All right. So, and not all of the words translate to English, so we'll do our best here. So, Marcus Hoffman has been appointed city dean of Bonn by the Archbishop of Cologne, Rainier Maria Cardinal Wolecki. This was announced by the Archdiocese of Cologne. The 56-year-old Hoffman takes office on the 1st of March, and in the course of this becomes pastor of the Bonn Cathedral community of St. Martin and the Associated Church of St. Peter. Let's see. So, as city dean, it will be his task to coordinate and promote pastoral work within the Bonn city dean's office. He is responsible for around 100,000 Catholics. So this is a very significant position. And they have a little interview. This news site sat down with him and had an interview. And they asked him, next month, you will move to Bonn and take over the leadership of the Catholic Church in the federal city as a city dean. What does this calling mean to them? And he says, I'm very happy to be able to come back to Bonn. I want to be there for everyone in the city. I've always had good experiences with Bonn. I had 2 sections in my life where I lived there. So he's happy about it, and he's happy to be back. And he says his concern is to bring people into contact with Christ. Now, there's something very specific that I'm looking for in here, and we'll know it when we see it. It says that there's a long tradition of Christian life in Bonn with a rich history. During this time in which we live, there are also many developments and many challenges. I am pleased that Caritas in Bonn is very well organized and well positioned. There are many things to do. There are a lot of valuable things there. I am thinking, for example, of the city patrons of Cassius and Florentius, for whom a festival week is held every year. Then he says again, my concern is to bring people into contact with Christ. All I do, my presence, my prayer, pastoral discussions, services, and charitable activities, all of which ultimately serve to bring people into contact with Jesus. Sure. Let's see. Here we go. So he's asked, you are also a member of the Holy Cross of the Priestly Society, which is close to Opus Dei. If you have your church image from Hollywood films, you can expect dark frets and conspiracies. What does reality look like for you? And he says, first I have this in bold, I don't express my personal spirituality to anyone else. It's something that helps me, which is nice if it's true. An essential idea is that all of our activities, and especially the professional work, that is my life as a priest, are an opportunity and should also be used to advance the kingdom of God, which you would expect to read from somebody who is occupying a religious position. This contact enriches my personal spirituality, and I'm very grateful for that. In my almost 30 years as a priest, I have found that it's always good to promote Catholic diversity and hear what is important to local people. It is important not to put your own ideas or experiences on others as a template, but to be open and to look together at what we can do to help. So you can go and read this interview. Truth be told, this guy sounds pretty normal. Like, I'm not really reading anything in here and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a travesty. It was just something that I wanted to highlight because anytime there's sort of a changing of hands with positions of authority in different regions all around the world, and somebody who is connected to Opus Dei in some way ends up getting that new position, I just like to mention it. There is a similar situation, I think started out in like 2023 maybe was the first I saw a headline about it, a new bishop that got sent to Iceland, I want to say, and he is also connected to Opus Dei, and that generated some really interesting conversations on the r/Opus Dei Exposed community. So if you are somebody who's interested in what's going to happen to this organization going forward, whether it's growing or diminishing, membership wise and everything, then definitely go and check out Opus Dei Exposed and read through some of those conversations, because it's generated some really interesting dialogue with some of these new changes and these younger individuals. I mean, this guy, he's middle-aged, but he looks young. He looks like he's, healthy and has energy, and also has a connection to this organization. And it'll be interesting just to kind of try to see if we can keep a finger on the pulse, what happens with these individuals' tenures in these positions. So just something that I wanted to highlight. We are moving right along, but let me jump in the chat real quick and check on some things. Let me know how the pace of things is going. If you want me to slow down or speed up, I can try to go faster. Ursus 1909 said, "Thank you for your research and your compassion in helping victims of Opus Dei." You're very welcome. It feels like the most meaningful thing that I could possibly be doing with my life right now, and it brings me a lot of personal satisfaction, so I am glad that it's appreciated. Scanergy said, "Great research work. I missed a lot, but I'll just rewatch it. Thanks for bringing it to people's attention." You're very, very welcome. And if you missed the last one, granted, like I said, the video is really, really dicey, but the audio quality, I think, is perfectly fine. And there was a little bit of a snafu as I was working through figuring out all of this new software, and that live stream accidentally got deleted from YouTube, but you can still, it's still up on my podcast. Like if you find my podcast anywhere, it'll still be up there, and I have it downloaded, so I could re-upload it maybe, but anyway, if you haven't seen that, you can still find it those places. But I'm very glad that people appreciate the research and everything. I'm a little bit of a nerd, and I like doing this kind of thing. I like learning about the world and learning more about the different influences that move and shape it. So I'm having a good time here too as well, even though sometimes it does get a little bit sad, just because these stories are so heartbreakingly similar. All right, so, oh wait, that was the one I was on. So let's get this translated. This is another article from Portuguese. This is from an online news journal. It was published February 10th. There are 1,600 members in Portugal, where it says Opus Dei. There are 1,600 members in Portugal, and the organization gains weight in Parliament. So this is another article that is kind of hard to get through. We're just going to kind of go through the first little bit of it, because I think, again, it's interesting to pay attention to these positions in government and elsewhere in society. Pay attention to who assumes them and who has connections to what. It's just learning how the world works. It's really interesting. The subheading says, "There have already been 6 deputies of the institution, Opus Dei, 6 deputies of the institution within the Catholic Church, which rejects this as a secret entity." I think they mean 6 deputies in Parliament who were already in Opus Dei, but they reject like it being a secret. I think. Let me know if that's correct. Sometimes it's like magnifying glass, dictionary. So they say that there are about 1,600 members of Opus Dei in Portugal. By official source of the institution, which gained greater expression in Parliament with the strengthening of the parliamentary group of Chega. So this is a political organization, I'm guessing, or is this like a party? The work, as it is known, rejects some kind of political action. So people in Parliament are also attached to Opus Dei, but Opus Dei is saying they don't have any interest in political actions of any type, and the presence of people in politics who are also members of Opus Dei is purely happenstance and coincidental and not an indication of anything else, I think, is how that disclaimer usually goes. But as we know, and this is a perfect example, those people are still there nonetheless. And considering the sort of fundamental, fanatical perspective that you could say Opus Dei takes of the world, it's definitely worth knowing, or at least paying attention when somebody is in a position like this and also in this organization, because if they're in that organization, it's reasonable to assume that they also support a lot of the same kind of fundamental views on the world. That's certainly how it is here in the United States, anyway. And they say that Opus Dei also confirms that in addition to these, there were 4 other members of the institution with a seat in the Assembly of the Republic. Amaro da Costa, Oliveira Diaz, and Tomas Espirito Santo, the 3 already deceased, and the CDS in Moda Amara, this PSD. So basically they're saying, like, it's not a secret that these people are in Parliament and in Opus Dei. Like, we'll even tell you who all it is. So the members of the institution, they also say there are no members of Opus Dei in the government, which is irrelevant because the main objective of the institution is to help the spiritual life of its members, whoever they are, says the work, which refuses the label of secret organization. So this reads strangely to me, because it's like, on the one hand, they're saying there's nothing strange to see here, and like, see, there's already been these individuals who were holding these public offices and like whatever. But then also they're saying in the same breath, but there are no members of Opus Dei in the government, which is irrelevant anyway. So it's like, well, are there or aren't there? Just make up your mind. And then they, everyone in Opus Dei is of age. Nobody's been recruited underage. Following the curve of the aging population, though, it does seem that there are fewer young people attending church. However, after World Youth Day, there is a greater interest of young people in faith, worship, and scripture, Opus Dei said. And they are very, very interested in doing everything that they can to take advantage of that interest. So this is going to seem very random, but it's all tied in. I promise. This is an article that was published 2 weeks ago, so about the middle of March, and it's discussing an interview that was going to happen on the Anthill. It says, Marian Rojas Estape and Opus Dei. This is the relationship between the successful psychiatrist and the Catholic institution. Oh, you know what? I remembered. So this woman came on my radar because of her father, actually, who is also a very well-known, prominent public figure in Spain. He is an alleged psychiatrist to the elite, the Spanish elite, and has written a lot of self-help books. And Marian Rojas Estape is his daughter, and she seems to be kind of following in her father's footsteps, which is interesting. And I just wanted to read this article. And actually, I remembered I should have switched these 2 tabs around, but I was tired when I organized this the other day. I want to read this one first, and then we're going to get into that other one. So this article is a little bit, let's see, 1202. Yeah, so this was published on the 12th of February. Who is viral psychiatrist Marian Rojas, and why is she so successful? The Madrid native is the best-selling author in Spain and leads the Spotify rankings with her self-help podcast. So very, very much in the vein of her father, Dr. Enrique Rojas Montes. If you know that name, then you probably know how he kind of moves through Spanish society. But she is 41 years old, as I said, the daughter of the famous psychiatrist Enrique Rojas Montes, and she is leading the charts in book sales. Rojas Estape has become famous for talking about the path to happiness, stress, and mobile addiction. She gives lectures and spreads her advice as well as her way of understanding life, especially through Instagram and TikTok. The Madrid native, who has a degree in medicine from the University of Navarra, is especially known for books such as Recover Your Mind, Regain Your Life, How to Make Good Things Happen to You, and Find Your Vitamin Person. Despite being idolized by many followers, her figure is not far from controversy. Raised in a very religious family, very close to Opus Dei, her speeches have been unquestioned for their conservative messages. So again, very close, very similar to her father. Her father and mother are both Opus Dei supernumeraries, very like well-known Opus Dei supernumeraries. But she has been accused of having a retrograde discourse, especially when it comes to women's rights. She is against, for example, the right to abortion and of focusing on individual responsibility for one's own failures. The state of mind depends on your attitude, she says in one of her books. However, her speeches have brought her almost 4 million followers on Instagram and 700,000 subscribers on YouTube. Apart from all her activity on social networks, she has a practice on Calle Serrano in Madrid, in the heart of the Salamanca district, one of the most affluent areas of the city. And I'm wondering if she inherited that from her father, Enrique, because that was where his practice was reported to be, at least back in like 2008, 2010 and stuff. So I'm wondering if she inherited that from him, or maybe she just moved in on the same block. But I do know that Calle Serrano in Madrid is supposed to be like a very expensive street. Like the real estate there is very, very pricey. Reading on, one other thing I wanted to say that I've noticed, and I don't quite know yet what to make of it. It's interesting. I don't know if I want to call them Opus Dei influencers exactly, but there are people starting to crop up, and I'm seeing it more so in Latin America. I haven't seen anybody come out in the English-speaking world yet, but it's just a matter of time, right? But I'm seeing this thing happening in Latin America with what I would call like Opus Dei influencers, people who are professionals in whatever their field may be. Like oftentimes I'm noticing it's medicine for some reason, which is interesting, maybe because that's a very respectable, you get the title of doctor and it sounds very respectable, and people will take you at your word and not question you when you say that you're a doctor in something. But these doctors who are professionals in their field and everything also happen to, have a connection to Opus Dei, and they have created platforms for themselves on social media. The Marian Rojas Estape is a perfect example, where they like share clips and posts about living life according to their perspective or whatever advice that they are dispensing, kind of like pop psychology type things, or almost like Jordan Peterson light type stuff is what I'm seeing, and it's really, really, really interesting. And I wonder where it's all going to lead. But I won't get too much into this article. It mostly just discusses her professional stuff, which is like speaking engagements and books that she's written, her perspective on the world. I mainly wanted to introduce her to you guys using this article because I figure gives you a cursory familiarity with who she is. And then I'm going to bounce back to this article that was published 2 weeks ago, Marian Rojas Estape and Opus Dei. This is the relationship between a successful psychiatrist and the Catholic institution. This is interesting. So it begins, this is from an interview, I suppose, that she did on The Anthill. It says, the guest this Tuesday night to The Anthill is the psychiatrist and disseminator Marian Rojas Estape, daughter of the also psychiatrist Enrique Rojas and the businesswoman Isabel Estape. Let's see. Her stories have reached 40 countries and 25 languages, being one of the authors with more sales in our country, whichever country this was. And then they say, a life marked by Catholic ideals and Opus Dei. They get right into it. Children are one of the first things to get used to thinking about when you hear the name Opus Dei. In this sense, Marian complies with what is expected, since she is the mother of a large family of 4 daughters, along with her husband, whom she married in 2014. Of course, gotta have the family, because I'm assuming she is probably a supernumerary, but we'll read on. Beyond the obvious, the Rojas family has never hidden its belonging to this institution linked to Catholicism. Quote, we are practicing Catholics. We get in the car and pray the rosary. We read the gospel as a family, end quote, Enrique has revealed in some interviews. Okay, well, simply because you do that stuff doesn't necessarily also mean that you're in Opus Dei, because my family did that stuff too, and as far as I know, Man, that would be the bombshell of a century, to find out that my parents had been supernumeraries at one point. But as far as I know, we were not, but we did all that stuff. Anyway, thus Marian has continued the family tradition, and in fact her younger sister has become a nun and has had to abandon her share of the pie to the company that manages family real estate with more than 5.5 million euros of value. So this family is richy rich, okay? Marian comes from a very well-to-do, very affluent, well-connected background. Another factor that points to Opus Dei living is as marked by institution fees, which many describe as a sect. These are very integrated into the life of the psychiatrist, and in the past, she explained that the faith it has been, and it is a determining factor to stay straight in the most complicated moments of your life, basically crediting Opus Dei to being where she is. As an example, she puts the terrible death of her brother in a pool when they were still young, something that deeply marked the family unit, which I can only imagine. That's fucking terrible. Another factor regarding religion is religious solidarity with those who have the least. Rojas has collaborated with various NGOs and with entities that are responsible for improving the lives of some people. I'd be very interested, I haven't had a chance to yet, look into exactly what these NGOs are and exactly what groups of people they're improving the lives for. I'm not going to say anything, making any accusation without knowing, but I would be interested in looking into that. Shortly after finishing the race, she traveled to Cambodia to contribute their grain of sand to the lives of the girls who had been sexually abused and worked in brothels. Another example is the summer she spent at a school in a poor community in the Bronx in New York to improve the lives of students. Also, she's a fervent defender of marriage and vindicates the need to dedicate time to the relationship between husband and wife, yada, yada, yada. And it doesn't go on much longer than that, but wanted to read this for a few reasons. One, it highlights the immense wealth that this family has. Two, I think it illustrates her dedication to the organization overall, or at least the fact that it has been a consistent through line throughout her life. And then three, it also kind of gives you some insight into how they view themselves in the context of the rest of the world. So just interesting. This is probably somebody to keep an eye on, or just like, not keep an eye on, that sounds creepy as heck. Do not attempt to contact, or harass anyone mentioned in this video on the behalf of me or anyone else. The purpose of this video is to give my opinion on matters of public concern. Thank you. But she's somebody to know about if you're interested in the Opus Dei web, just because she and her family are connected into some really interesting things. And I will share more about that very, very soon. So this is another article pertaining to the entire situation in Peru. It's like the gift that just keeps on giving. This is from the AP, and it was published February 11th by Franklin Briceño. Headline reads, Pope Francis accepts the resignation of a Peruvian bishop accused of ignoring abuse. Pope Francis on Tuesday accepted the resignation of an influential Peruvian bishop, and you might think this is Cipriani, but it's not, because he was already dealt with. This is somebody different. He's come under criticism for not doing enough to stop abuses committed by a conservative Catholic movement that was recently disbanded by the Vatican, Sodalicio. Peru's Bishops' Conference said Archbishop Miguel Cabreos from the Diocese of Trujillo will be replaced by the Jesuit Bishop Gilberto Vizcarra. A reason for the Pope's decision was not provided. So, Cabreos, 76, was the president of Peru's Bishops' Conference until January and had held the position for 12 years. In a statement published last year, the Archbishop said that he had presented his resignation letter to the Vatican in 2023 in accordance with the Catholic Church laws that call on bishops to prepare for retirement at age 75. During that time that Archbishop Cabreos led the Bishops' Conference, the Peruvian-based Catholic movement Sodalicio was accused of sexually abusing its recruits, of threatening journalists, and of deploying schemes to strip peasants of their lands in the north of Peru. It sounds like something from a nightmare, because it is. Victims of the movement, known also as SCV, have accused Cabreos of turning a blind eye to these practices. He was indifferent towards victims, said Pedro Salinas, a journalist and former member of the SCV who published a book about the group's abuses that unleashed several investigations into the conservative Catholic movement. That book, did they mention, it was called Half Monks, Half Soldiers, I believe. I'm not going to read this whole article because, again, I'm doing an entire deep dive into Sodalicio and just what's happened with the organization. But go and read this if you would like more context about this this bishop, Cabreos. I wanted to share this, though, just to put it on your radar that there's more coming out about Sodalicio and the people connected to it and everything that happened during those years. This is the article that I was talking about. This is from Hungary, somewhere in Hungary, and it looks like it's on some type of a new, it's like somebody's news site, you know, and then they have a subscription, which is their complete and total right, but I can only get down about so far in the article. But we'll read what we can because it's really, really interesting. And again, keeping an eye on people who gain positions of authority in different places. This definitely fits that category. So this was published on February 12th. The Hungarian organization of Opus Dei has found a way to the parliament, which carries out ideological education in Budapest using the MCC web God's Work, would rewrite abortion regulation and erase the campaign of Daniel Karsai from the public consciousness. Headline, he would ban abortion. His proposal for the porn blacklist is there in parliament, so Opus Dei expands in Hungary. Believers gather in the frost in front of St. Anne's Church in Servita Square in Pest City, arriving for the Sunday Mass of Opus Dei. Marcin Romanowski, former Polish deputy minister of justice, accused of embezzlement, also belongs to this Catholic ecclesiastical organization, who was granted asylum in Hungary last year. That's right, I remember reading about that. After the disappearance of the politician, the silent Opus Dei was forced to issue a statement that the man circled in Poland had not pulled himself together. Romanowski is a numerary of the organization, that is, one of the secular, I think they mean celibate, members who, although not priests, have received voluntary celibacy and live in one of the centers of the organization. It's weird that they would say that because at Opus Dei, other than like priests incarnated within Opus Dei, it's not like Opus Dei, I guess they have clergy. They have priests incarnated. It's technically the same thing. I've just never read, say, like, oh, these a secular member versus like a religious member. Anyway, and even though there was no specific connection between the organization and the escape that caused the scandal, Romanowski could find acquaintances in Hungary. Opus Dei also maintains 2 dormitories in Budapest, and Archbishop Peter Erdo left their church in 2006 to lead the organization. This is the Church of St. Anne in the city center, which is largely attended by foreign guests, mixed among the waiters to hear them speak Spanish. But there are also Hungarians led by Peter Heltai and Norbert Philemon, who, despite their young age, have become important players in the campaign for the Christian family policy of Fidesz. The Mass is held by Philip Gudenus, born in Vienna, in Hungarian. The often Holy Mafia, nicknamed Opus Dei, is an organization on the radical right wing of the Catholic Church, 90,000 members, founded in 1928, Jose Maria Escrivá. But it says, specifically in regard to Hungary, Opus Dei has been doing apostolic work since the early 1990s. Its Hungarian institutions are home to more than 50 supernumeraries and 40 numeraries, most of them from Spanish-speaking areas, which is interesting. But there are other foreigners, Germans, Austrians, and even Filipino, and I am really sorry, but I don't know how to pronounce that. And I'm not going to try. But they have some diversity. 2 dormitories are maintained in Budapest. The Orbánegi College is home to men, and this cultural center and college is home to women. And there's more information, but it's behind a paywall. But I just wanted to share this because, first of all, it gives some information about Opus Dei's presence in a country that I have not talked too much about, which is Hungary, and also some current events, and then also that whole situation with this guy running to hide. I remember when that was playing out, and that was really, really interesting. So just something to have on your radar. So this is from Zenit. Spanish to English. New statutes for Opus Dei this 2025. This says the prelate. So I thought this was worth mentioning. Bishop Fernando Ocaires, prelate of Opus Dei, asked for prayers for the study of the new statutes of the work and pointed out that this work may be completed in 2025. Statutes of Opus Dei were promulgated by John Paul II, 1982. The motu proprio ad charisma tuendum, reported by Zenit on July 24, 2022, asked Opus Dei to facilitate effective evangelization, to promote a fruitful ecumenical spirit, and engage in constructive dialogue with everyone. After the motu proprio, the prelature worked on the modification of the statutes as ordered by Pope Francis, a task carried out by the prelature in coordination with the Vatican's dicastery for the clergy, whom the Pope commissioned to accompany the work, perhaps because most of the prelature's relations with the Vatican deal with priestly matters, although 98% of its members are lay people. Bishop Fernando Ocaires declared in a message on January 25th, "Let us continue to pray a lot for the study on the statutes of the work," because they still don't have them figured out. "Although the term and the ultimate result of this work does not depend on us but on the Holy See, it seems to me foreseeable that it will be concluded within this year. The reforms aim for the Opus Dei government to be more charism-based than hierarchical authority." So read the rest of the article in your own time, but let me know what you think about that. All right, we've been going for a while here, and we still have some stuff to get through. I'm trying to keep this kind of moving along. Let me know if I'm going too fast. This article is interesting, and I wanted to read it because it's not often you hear about women in Opus Dei, especially powerful ones. It says the most powerful woman in Opus Dei says that the work has learned from its mistakes and looks to the future with enthusiasm. But they do look to the future with enthusiasm, especially right now. It says the Central Secretary for the Opus Dei Advisory, Isabel Sanchez, has granted an interview in which she reflects on the learning of the institution, its centenary, and the challenges it faces in the world today. Quote, "We have made mistakes, and recognizing them makes us stronger, highlighting the need for adaptation without losing the essence of the founding charism of St. Jose Maria Escrivá." So I'm not going to read any more of it. I'm just going to kind of let it hang right there, because I think that pretty much says everything that you need to know about this article and also about the attitude of Opus Dei. And for anyone who may not be able to read between those lines quite as well as I am by having just been doing this for a while, I would remind you that, you know, it has been stated by numerous former members, including in the International Ecclesiastical Complaint that was filed in Rome by Antonio Moya et al. Back in 2023, that Opus Dei intends to cede without conceding with the intention of recovering. That is verbatim the language that was used in that complaint. And they are optimistic about the future because they are going to recover everything that St. Jose Maria Escrivá wrote, come hell or high water, essentially. So, and Escrivá is the reason for a number of the conditions within Opus Dei, not the least of which are the numerary assistant class of members. So it'll be interesting to see how all of this plays out, but I think you can kind of read between the lines here and see the writing on the wall. I'm like layering on metaphors here, but I think you know what I mean. Here's another article. This is featuring Paula Bistagnino. She's an incredible journalist who has been doing a lot of work covering the situation in Argentina with the former assistant numeraries. She's also been talking about the situation in Mexico. She's everywhere. She's somebody to keep in mind. I'm a big fan of her. She's doing some really important work. And she got featured in this article, which was written by Jorge Zapata on February 15th. She said, quote, "Opus Dei is an actor in this kind of setback." And she has written a book, "I Will Follow You," where she analyzed the influence of this ecclesiastical organization in various countries in South America, that over the years she managed to establish a power network with strong connections in Chile, or it managed to establish a power network with strong connections in Chile. And it says, just here to start out, the former Minister of Education, the former Mayor of Las Condes, Joaquin Lavin, the former deputy Jorge Zabag, the lawyer and columnist for El Mercurio, Gonzalo Rojas, and the Republican lawyer and former constituent Luis Silva are some names that were related to the Opus Dei over the years. These are just a few examples of the links in Chile between this Catholic prelature and the characters from the social elite and economy. The Opus Dei managed to penetrate the Chilean upper class, and when I mean the upper class is the one with the most power, economic power, more access to politics and others, which is particularly the Chilean right, she notes, author of the book I Will Serve You, which offers a detailed overview of how this group developed in the region. This prelature is distinguished by its unique structure within the Catholic Church. In a conversation with Radio and University of Chile Journal, the Argentine journalist remembered that she was born and raised in the neighborhood with a beautiful view of Buenos Aires. As she commented, in that place, the Opus Dei has a lot of presence, which caught her attention from an early age. However, her main motivation came when Jorge Bergoglio, current Pope of the Catholic Church, reached the highest pontificate in 2013. I knew he was a Jesuit and that the Jesuits historically, they had a rivalry with that organization. So I wondered what would happen to Opus Dei, which for so many years had been very, very powerful, she said. From that moment, she began to search for testimonies, beginning with her homeland, then to Spain, a country where this work has quite a few members. Her investigation was not without complications. The journalist reported that the main obstacle, without a doubt, is that this is a practically closed institution which generally does not give interviews. The challenge was to go beyond the walls. Once across borders, she discovered the story of a family of Chilean Uruguay pioneers, Gianoli Gainza. In this way, she identified that the practices of Opus Dei in Chile were similar to those of Argentina and other countries in the region, something she describes in her text. So she was boots on the ground, putting this information together, talking to people, doing the really, really hard work. I Will Serve You is a story of one of the first families to be made of Opus Dei in Santiago at the beginning of the 50s, when the organization reaches Chile and also to Argentina. From the history of that family, I was able to know a little more about what was happening in Chile, that, as I tell you, it is very similar to what happens in Argentina, to what happens in Uruguay, and all 68 countries in which it is present, she stated. So I would absolutely love, again, this is another book that I would love to get my hands on, I Will Serve You. I would love to see it in an English translation, clearly, but someday I'll be able to read it, hopefully someday very, very soon. And I hope that lots and lots of people read this book, because it deserves the attention. And it's cool to see people doing the legwork to create more of a timeline for this organization and how they have moved through the world and through these various countries, because not only is it a little bit different just depending on where in the world you are and the various factors that were at play and pressures that were just like playing out in the world at those various times, but also within that, it reveals that the playbook doesn't really change that much. This organization kind of does the same thing no matter what. And people doing that legwork to create that record and that timeline really help to drive that point home. This is the article I wanted to focus on a little bit more, just because it has some more direct quotes from Paula, and I just wanted to elevate and send out her words to a little bit more of an audience. Again, she's saying in this interview that Mexico is an example of a safe territory for Opus Dei. This was published February 17th in the La Jornada newspaper. Investigative journalist Paula Bistagnino speaks in an interview about her book. This author states that certain practices, such as the capture of great fortunes and the submission of poor people, are systematically applied in each of the 68 countries where Opus Dei operates. Part of the difficulty of her investigation resided in the absence of response from the self-styled La Obra, who, on the contrary, decided to deny it in a statement, a habitual practice towards those who contradict her discourse in the world. This is the first part of 2 installments of the interview with the journalist Paula Bistagnino. And they start out talking about what Opus Dei is. I'm not going to read that because I already know. You can go and read it in your own time if you want the context. They ask, is there a direct relationship between Opus and military dictatorships? And Paula says, the most fertile territory for Opus Dei outside of Spain was Latin America. He arrived in Mexico first because they were interested in its size and Catholicism, then to the United States, and then to the countries of the center and south. I interviewed former Opus members in Mexico, Peru, Colombia, Argentina, Ecuador, and Uruguay. In all these countries, it has gotten along very well with dictatorial governments and the right as an ally of the anti-communist struggle in Latin America. It has been a very important arm to fight even doors within the church to the leftmost lines. In Argentina, at different periods of the dictatorship, Opus Dei has donated a half a block in the most expensive neighborhood of the Buenos Aires, and they granted him a subsidy for the construction of the main headquarters. This was a story until I could corroborate it with documentation. Let's see. They're talking about Opus Dei's secrecy, and they say, what else did you find in your investigation? And Paula says, I was struck by the fact that they are very professionally trained and very intelligent people, but something religiously operated on them to make their lives and actions conditioned by that elite. They entered to be the cog in a larger plan. Opus Dei is a machinery that eliminates people's subjectivity. Its founder, Jose Maria Escriva, said that people are like little screws from that machinery. I entered looking for faith and a way of life attached to it, and I found a machinery of power and an organization of economic power with a lot of people at the service of an institution that wants to govern, that has a vocation for power, and that seeks money with a direct and visceral intention. Go and read the rest of that article if you would like to read more direct quotes, but Paula is saying it with her full chest, and I just love to see it. So if you can support her work in any way, if just following her on social media, she is on X and she's on Instagram, or by buying her book if you would like to and are able to read it, please do, because this kind of work, especially what she's doing, like boots on the ground, really like getting in and like talking to people and doing that legwork, that's real journalism and very, very, very difficult and generally kind of undervalued by people too, I think. So this article, Miguel Rastrero, quote, Vox has been radicalized by Opus Dei and is very powerful. This is from La Voz de Fuerteventura. It was published on February 19th, so we're making our way towards the end of the month here. And this is talking about political news in Latin America. And we'll just read through here and see what it has to say. I'm happy I've done what I had to do. I should have done it before. Thus begins the interview on the program La Voz de Fuerteventura on Radio Insular with the former coordinator of Vox in La Isla, Miguel Felipe Rastrero, until a few days ago. Last week, he announced his departure from the party with 5 coordinators from the island's municipalities, with the exception of La Oliva. Rastrero justified his departure fundamentally by the closure of the island headquarters and, above all, discrepancies related to the prospecting of rare earths. Let's see. He said, I do not understand that radical change and have made it the Vox flag in the Canary Islands Parliament. It's an amazing thing, he affirmed, emphasizing that Vox, which I believe is a political party, but correct me if I'm wrong, was emphasizing that Vox was left alone defending the exploration of these resources while the rest of the groups positioned themselves against it. Let's see. And they're basically just talking about the push and pull and the arguments because of the rare earth mining. There was something in here. Yeah, more radical, more Opus. During the interview, the former island coordinator criticized the absence of internal debate and the party's radicalization. The liberal flag has been abandoned and increasingly extreme positions have been entered, he stressed. The former island coordinator also underlined the influence of very conservative sectors within the party, making explicit reference to Opus Dei. Formation has almost also become ultra-Catholic. Opus Dei has a lot of power now in formation. That's a reality, and I have to say it. Along these lines, he stressed that in the Vox provincial executive, more than half of the members are from Opus Dei. That I have nothing against Opus Dei, Rastrero stressed. For the mayor, you have to be more municipalist and not use the municipalities as a speaker of national policy. Anyway, just another example of people with connections to this organization being in positions of political influence. Make of it what you will. This is interesting. February 22nd, Peter Wolfgang published an article on Catholic culture, My Thoughts as Pope Francis Nears His Death, or Doesn't. And I'm bringing this up because he reiterates a sentiment that I saw expressed some time ago, and I'll get into when that was. But he's saying he's praying for Pope Francis, who we know has been in critical condition in a hospital. Quote, whatever will be, will be. The Pope looms large in our minds, doesn't he? The Pope in general and this Pope in particular, how could he not? He says, elsewhere, I've written about the faith imparted to me by my recently deceased grandmother, a Portuguese-American woman who came of age in mid-20th century, New Bedford, Massachusetts. There was a naturalistness to her faith. National Catholic reporters Brian Fraga, who is younger than I but comes from the same town and ethnic background as my grandmother, nailed this quality once in an old Facebook post. He noted that devotion to Our Lady of Fatima is everywhere in his community, but not the apocalyptic speculation around it that so excites the wider Catholic world. So anyway, just talking about that, talking about his perspective of Catholicism, and he says, I've felt this different, especially in the age of Pope Francis. My view. And then he says, I feel about it as Austin Roos does in a piece he wrote in 2023 about Opus Dei. No matter what happens with the Vatican, I'll keep doing Opus Dei. This should not be viewed as a challenge or to disrespect Pope Francis, he says, or even of his canonical advisors. May God bless them abundantly, one and all. This statement is merely the reality of my baptismal promises. The Catholic Church is having a moment. And I think time will tell what will become of it. But, it's an interesting time to be paying attention to Roman Catholicism. All right. This article, Living Within Opus Dei, Psychological Sequels or Post-Traumatic Stress. National meeting analyzes in Santiago the behavior of groups with a sect trend, many of them integrated into Galatian society. This was published on February 26th. For years, I lived a double life. In the morning, it was Marina, the super funny aunt who was going to college. And in the afternoon, I was massacred. I'm not exactly sure what that word, if that's English or a mistranslation, to tie the rules of Opus Dei, says Marina, member of the religious group. Psychological abuse, coercive doctrine, environmental control, or emotional manipulation are some of the characteristics that led to classifying a group as a sect. It is not always easy to identify these patterns and to raise awareness among society about this. The Ibero-American Association for the Research of Psychological Abuse celebrates this weekend in Santiago National Meeting on Psychological Abuse. Experts estimate that 1% of the Spanish population currently belongs to some group with sect characteristics or in its own sex, points to the psychiatrist and president. Despite not being exact figures, a state delves into this area. It's estimated up to 400 organizations could be operating in the country. Okay, 400 organizations with a sect-like characteristic in some way, shape, or form. I wanted to bring that up just because I think it's important to reiterate again the fact that organizations like this, regardless of whether they're religious, exist in everywhere. You could join a high control group for literally anything under the sun because there's all kinds, and I think that is important to mention and to outline. They also talk about again Opus Dei's underage recruitment in this article. They mention the heroic minute, the psychological abuse, imposed doctrine, and manipulation of minors being some of the allegations that are being made. It's a good article if you would like to read the entire thing, but I just want to mention that, and I think it's great that this conversation is beginning to enter mainstream society in different parts of the world more. It's definitely happening here in the United States as well. Dr. Robert Hansen has done a lot of work talking about high control groups and how they manifest in society, how to look out for them, and how to not fall into the trap of joining one. All right, let me look at the chat real quick, see how we're doing for time. We've been going for a little while now, so. Just looking through the chat. You guys have been busy. Mike845 said, claiming no political action may allow them to avoid, Opus Dei, to avoid being registered as a political action committee, aka a lobbying firm. That's possible. Oh, this is interesting. Scanergy said, yeah, for sure, regarding Marian Estape, Rojas Estape. She said, yes, for sure. I haven't got it. She hasn't got it herself regarding like the office space. Serrano is the most expensive street in Madrid. She's considered nearly a saint, as I read in the newspaper El País not so long ago. And that's the same sort of like deferential attention and treatment is paid towards her father as well, who's a very, very, very interesting character and somebody that I will be speaking more on in the very near future. Mike's 845 said half monk, half soldier is the entire idea behind Knights Templar, monks that carried swords, the original international bankers. I think the Knights Templar was probably my first like rabbit hole that I kind of went down when I started getting interested in history and some of the controversies and intrigues around different historical events and organizations and entities, and it was a good introductory one, I think, because it keeps popping back up, and that period of time when the Knights Templar, you know, all those many many trips to the Middle East that they took, and really just what was happening in the world at that time as a whole. I was really interested in that part of history for a while, and I think the Knights Templar were like my gateway drug to like deep dive research into things, which is funny to think about now. I'm sorry if the audio is too low. I could turn it up a little bit. Does that make it any better? I don't I don't want to blow out my speakers. I apologize if the audio could be better. I am always trying to make improvements, so if there's other issues you're noticing, please let me know. Okay, people are complaining about ads. Let me see what I can do about that really quick. I'm gonna let me blow myself up here because I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna go back behind the scenes and see if I can do something about the ads. I might not be able to until the stream's over though, which kind of sucks. All right, give me just a moment here. I appreciate you guys letting me know about things. I am learning all the time. Yeah, it doesn't look like on my end, unless there's something else that I'm not seeing, like there's anything that I can do about the ads, which I apologize for. But if they are so incredibly annoying that you just can't deal with the stream and you want to leave, I completely understand. I'll just continue as normal, wrap this stream up, and when I publish the live stream to my channel, I'll be able to go in and adjust those settings, and I can drop it down from whatever it's at. There's like different tiers that YouTube gives you in studio for how aggressive you want ads to be shown, and it just needs to be turned down. So I will do that after this is over. I apologize that there isn't more I can do about it right now. Alrighty. Let me see if I can get my web page pulled up. Try to wrap up here. I appreciate everybody hanging out. shrink myself back down. Okie dokie. Let's keep on plugging away. So this article was published February 27th, 2025. Anti-Catholic bias, hard to hide in new book on Opus Dei. All right, you guys are still talking about the connectivity issues. Again, I apologize. If you have to leave, come back and listen to this after it's already, wrapped up and finished. It'll at least be a little bit smoother then. Live streams are always a little bit of a crapshoot. You never know what you're going to get. But this is a book, Anti-Catholic Bias, or an article about the book Opus by Gareth Gore, Anti-Catholic Bias, Hard to Hide, written by Monsignor Richard Antal, Angelus News. I just wanted to mention it in the interests of just keeping an open conversation about the various perspectives on the information that's coming out about this organization, how people are perceiving it and paying attention to it and everything. Oscar Wilde once ironically described an acquaintance as an excellent man whom he said has no enemies and none of his friends like him. Adjusting Wilde's aphorism, I would say that a Catholic institution like Opus Dei that has such fierce enemies must also have some friends who like it very much. A more direct line from Winston Churchill probably meant the same thing. Quote, "You have enemies? Good. That means you've stood up for something sometime in your life." Such thoughts come to mind after slogging through the latest example of Opus Dei hate writing, Opus by Gareth Gore. The subtitle of the book is a series of unfriendly characterizations, the cult of dark money, human trafficking, and right-wing conspiracy inside the Catholic Church, all inflammatory and all untrue. In multiple YouTube appearances promoting the book, Gore has claimed that he has nothing against Catholics. He might have fooled me, but I had not actually read his book. Gore says he was raised without religion because his Irish father was disgusted with Catholicism as a religion of guilt, that he presents this as a bona fide to demonstrate his objectivity about the church indicates where he is on the religious spectrum. I feel like that's a little unfair, but financial reporter Gare says that he began his investigation into Opus Dei because he had reported on the collapse of a Spanish bank, the Banco Popular. Only late in the book do we find a reference to a sharp decline in property values, which has led independent experts to tie the collapse of the bank to the mortgage mania, like in the U.S. crisis of 2008. So they're basically saying that his entire case that Opus Dei members basically hijacked Banco Popular to help fund Opus Dei endeavors is a gross mischaracterization of the facts. And I suppose because the book is in print, I would leave that final determination up to each and every individual person to make for themselves. Clearly, the Monsignor Antal has a perspective of the situation, and that's his opinion, and he's entitled to it. I have a very different opinion, and I am coming from the perspective of someone who was raised Catholic and was raised inside the Catholic Church. And it's interesting that he's banging on in this article about Gore's alleged anti-Catholic attitude. And I think that's interesting because his book wasn't really about the Catholic Church, was it? It was about Opus Dei. But there's this interesting thing that happens where anytime criticism is brought up about Opus Dei, you don't have to look very far to find people defending Opus Dei as if Opus Dei and the Catholic Church are one in the same, and treating an attack on Opus Dei as an attack on the church as a whole. This is something that was very astutely identified pretty early on in the whole Operation Lemonade situation when Opus Dei was trying to save face following the release of the Da Vinci Code and all of the attention that it brought to them for really the first time ever in the Western world. And people pointed out that their response to that, amongst many other things, was also phrased in such a way as to make any criticism of the organization sound like and appear to be an attack or criticism of the Catholic Church, which is really, really interesting. And also, not true. Opus Dei is a religious organization within the Catholic Church, but it is not the Catholic Church. It's a part of it, but it is not it as an entirety. And yet you will still find this sort of like, oh, that book is just anti-Catholic. That person is just being anti-Catholic. You just hate Catholics. I've had people tell me that I'm just, I have an axe to grind against the Catholic Church, and I just hate the church because I'm talking about these issues with Opus Dei. And from my point of view, most of the time, unless you're talking about something very specific where you're criticizing something that the Vatican did or did not do in response to this organization, I'm only concerned in talking about Opus Dei and their behavior. I am only interested in holding Opus Dei responsible, because I believe that, at least for the most part, especially when you're talking about people who are claiming to have been harmed by other people in this organization, the issue lies squarely at their feet. That's my opinion and my perspective. It's not about the Catholic Church at all, and it's really important to emphasize that and reiterate it. And, going into reading Opus, I was on the lookout for that sort of like anti-Catholic tone. I mean, I've been hearing about the persecution of Christians and of Catholics in this country, the United States, the cultural persecution, if you will, since I was very, very young. So this entire idea that the Catholic Church is constantly under assault by outside people who are just trying to destroy something good and pure is not new, and it's not original, and it comes up all of the time. But I find it really, really disingenuous. Like, way to completely skirt the entire issue as a whole by just saying he was just being anti-whatever in his criticisms. I did not pick up on the anti-Catholic tone that people are talking about, and I was prepared for it, but I think that's because I went in already knowing that Opus Dei is not necessarily representative of the Catholic Church, because I grew up Catholic and I had my own experiences outside and away from this organization. So something that I wanted to throw out there and put on your radar, because this book is not going to go away. It's done really, really well. It's been received really, really well. And so people are going to continue to talk about it over the years, especially as things continue to unfold with this organization in different countries around the world. So add it to the bulletin board. All right, moving right along. February 28th, at the end of the month. From a difficult youth to institutional communication, Gianluca, who's originally from Teramo, tells of his vocation as an aggregate and the professional path that led him to work in the world of communication. This is on Opus Dei's Italian news site. Somebody who had a very difficult childhood. He said that his father abandoned him when they were very young, leaving them in a very difficult economic situation with a lot of suffering that left him with a lot of anger towards his father. And it's basically just a story about how this person who had religion as a part of their life also overcame difficulty and did all these various things. Ultimately ended up on Opus Dei's radar. So after school, it says that he started working in a travel agency in Pescara, where he met a supernumerary from Opus Dei. Quote, he invited me to consider the idea of continuing my studies, even if I was not convinced. In the end, he spoke to me about the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross, and without a precise plan, I decided to enroll in the Faculty of Communication. So at 19, he moved to Rome, which was a radical change. and now he is working in the university's television studio, refining his communication skills and contributing to Opus Dei's effort to reach more people around the world. You can read that article in its entirety down in my source document down below. So just to wrap things up, a couple of things. A couple quick little posts that I want to read from r/Opus Dei Exposed, and then a couple of actual obituaries that we're going to look at and just mention very briefly. So this is from 11 days ago. User asks, does life in Opus Dei have to suck for Opus Dei to survive? And they said, apologies for using suck. It's crude and I rarely use it. My kids know not to use it, but I will use it a few times a decade. Sometimes it's the perfect world. Sometimes it's the perfect word. Life in Opus Dei just plain sucks, but it must suck in order for Opus Dei to survive as an institution. There have been reports about some changes being made and that Opus Dei members have more freedom and flexibility than before. Whether those reforms and changes are real and substantial or only superficial is unclear to me. But any healthy reforms, although good for the individual, will not be good for the institution. It is the rigor and oppressiveness of life in Opus Dei that makes the institution work. I recall reading somewhere, in Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind perhaps, about the initially counterintuitive finding that strict religious and non-religious institutions tend to flourish, while those that become laxer, such as mainline Protestant denominations, tend to fade. The onerousness, strictness, and difficulty are the benefits of for the individual and are the causes of the individual's commitment, and the institution benefits by having committed individuals. This is a pretty lengthy post, and they go into detail about different examples illustrating their point, basically. Go and read it in its entirety if you hadn't seen it yet, but I also wanted to read some of the comments here, so we're going to move through it pretty quick. True Grit 10 said, if that's true, so be it. I do think a reformed Opus Dei would look very different from the Opus Dei of today. I think that it would be a tremendous thing. Could we envision perhaps a movement with a true lay mentality and charism instead of the religiosity doublespeak, or a true respect and culture of individuals' freedom, or a healthy, flexible, and insightful discernment process, or a vision that encourages, uplifts, and supports creativity, imagination, and initiative instead of squelches it via conformity from above? Or where there are clear expectations and understandings of what the benefits and responsibilities are to being a member versus just being a participant in an activity. Somebody said it's not just about freedom and personal identity. It's also about what exactly is at the core of the organization's reason for being. In Opus Dei, the core is, quote, the founder's divine vision. It's not Jesus. What would Opus Dei look like if Jesus were at the core? Well, for one thing, you could go on visits to the poor for the very sake of serving the poor instead of for the sake of recruiting numeraries. I think that to put the Jesus of the gospel, the historical real Jesus, at the center of it all would absolutely destroy Opus Dei. Let me know what you think. This is a post that was put up 16 days ago. Some absolutely fantastic work from community members over here, and they had some fun with some stats and shared some data, and it's pretty interesting. I'm going to scroll down and show you the data first, and then we'll go from there. So they created a data set for the U.S. Women's Branch to try to determine the member status, basically. And so they have these different categories. 77.5% are in. These are the names that they could recall. 77.5% are in. 5.1% were deceased. 4.3% they didn't know, and 13.2% have left. And they broke it down further and got really, really pretty organized with the information. I put up a post on the Deep Dive Project's Instagram page with all of this as well. So follow me there, go and look at that if you haven't, or go and read this post in its entirety because it's impressive what they were able to do, and I love to see it. But here's a little bit of information about the slide, or about the information that they present, and then there's slide information here as well, but I probably won't read that just because I'm trying to move through this. A couple of weeks ago, someone asked numeraries, how many are there in Opus Dei? As part of the discussion, Objective Basis, who's another user, pointed out The way to know the real number of Nooms, Ags, Naxes is to make a list of everyone you knew and total it up. So, I mean, like numeraries, the AGDS is like not the assistant numeraries, because that's this category, and it's not the supernumeraries. I'm not exactly sure what that abbreviation is, but it's a category of, and they explain that down below. But they also go on to say that, funny thing, some of us had already been doing just that for the U.S. Women's Branch. I've attached graphs of our main findings, and they anonymize those, and I describe them along with additional context below. This is a very interesting and revealing exercise, given the smoke screen you get from any official Opus Dei communications about numbers of members. I hope it brings some clarity to this conversation and that it can be replicated for other regions/branches. I'd love to hear people's thoughts on what we found, and if anyone has questions about ethical considerations and decision making for this kind of project, feel free to DM me. So if you are interested in participating, chipping in on this type of work, if you are a former member and you have information that you could share to help create, better data, anonymized data, we're not interested, it's not about like exposing people or anything like that. It's simply about trying to get a clear picture of what is actually going on. And if you are good with data and numbers and that kind of thing, there is room for you here for sure. We'll check out some of the comments. Said this is a fascinating study and really confirms what I have long suspected, but that there are only 36 NACs, assistant numeraries, in the whole U.S. Mind-blowing. The average age of numeraries and numerary assistants is 60s. Desperate times. So everybody's kind of aging out, and Opus Dei is really struggling to refresh everything, which is why they've started to pivot to other things, and I've talked about that in the past. Objective Basis 6818 said the number of women numeraries in the USA, about 237, is informative for the worldwide figure of total numeraries. First of all, in around 2019, I was told that the number of male and female numeraries in the US was even. Also, in around 2018, in the US, they told us that the US had the most numeraries of any Opus region after Spain. They did not tell us what the difference in number was between Spain and the USA. Huge, no doubt, but still, since Ocaires said recently in an interview that Mexico is the second largest region after Spain, that means that Mexico has fewer numeraries than the USA, and that the other Latin American countries have fewer numeraries than Mexico. Since 80% to 90% of Opus members, quote unquote, are in Spain and Latin America, that gives you a rough picture of the worldwide population. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff that could be done with this information, and I think it's cool to see people contributing on collaborative exercises like this. It's really cool to see. All right, so last two things that we're going to look at, and then I'm going to be wrapping up. These are actually just a couple of obituaries. In addition to the news headlines and everything else that I see come up in my news inbox, I get obituaries too, because those are headlines just like any other news, and if the person was in Opus Dei and it's mentioned in the obituary, then I end up seeing their obituary, at least an article discussing their passing. So this was from February 7th. Virginia McCaskey, Chicago Bears owner and pro-life Catholic, dies at 102. And 102 is amazing and very impressive, and it sounds like she had a very long and amazing life. Says that she survived by 9 of her 11 children, 6 boys and 3 girls, as well as 21 grandchildren, 40 great-grandchildren, and 4 great-great-grandchildren, the Chicago Tribune reported. But it said that her parents were both children of immigrants, her mother being a German Lutheran and her father a Czech Catholic. It said that McCaskey's paternal grandmother, who lived with them for part of every year, prayed the rosary every day. McCaskey later realized many of her grandmother's prayers must have been for me and my brother. So religion and the faith that she saw in the lives of the people around her had an impact on her from a very early age. But then Through a Bible study class in the early 1970s, McCaskey said she got connected to the devotional group World Apostolate of Fatima, formerly the Blue Army of Our Lady of Fatima. She also became acquainted with mothers of girls attending Willows Academy, a local all-girls school under the care of the Catholic Personal Prelature Opus Dei. McCaskey later became a cooperator to support the work of Opus Dei, probably directly supporting that school. So anyway, she has since passed away. May she rest in peace. I wanted to mention that because I saw that in my inbox. And then the last obituary is for Father Thomas James McGovern. This is from, is there a date? February 24th. It says, Reverend Father Thomas James, County Dublin, late of Ballymote, formerly of the ESB, February 21st, passed peacefully in Fox Rock Nursing Home. So it was February 21st. Beloved son of the late Thomas and Mara, much loved brother, blah, blah, blah. He was the original, let's see. He is missed by many people, grandnephews, extended family, friends, everyone at Knapton House, the regional vicar of Opus Dei, Father Christian Vander Ploeg, and the members of Opus Dei. May he rest in peace. So anyway, Opus Dei. Until death do they part. So, all right, that pretty much brings me to the end of the news articles that I wanted to go over for this live stream. We've been going for a hot minute, so I appreciate everybody who has hung out. I'm really happy about the fact that it seems like, anyway, things are... The issues that I was having last time don't seem to be repeating themselves this time around, which is cool. I'm actually finishing this stream on camera. By this time last time, my webcam had already died, so... You know, things are getting better. It's every inch is a mile. But thank you so much for being here for this newsroom analysis. I really appreciate it. Just a reminder, anything, links to connect with me and to support my work if you so desire are in the description of this video, along with a source document with all links to every single headline that I went over in this video. What else? If you or someone you know is in need of mental health support, I also have some mental health resources in the description of this live stream as well. So please take advantage of them if you need them. But that is where I'm going to leave this for now. Thank you so much. It means more than you know that you spent this time with me. I guess I should take a look at the chat before I just run and just leave. Okay, yeah. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. I'm just reading through your messages. Thank you for being here, and thank you for giving me your time and your attention. It means more than you can possibly know. But that is where I'm going to leave it for now. Please give this a thumbs up, share it with somebody if you think that they would enjoy it, and remember, Nolite te bastardes corporandorum. Don't let the bastards drag you down.